And declare the meeting open. So welcome members to the third meeting for the Committee of Finance in this mandate. Other committees haven't even met once, and this is our third meeting, so we should be proud of our work rate. Members, obviously this meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online. Those in the public gallery, we are not teaming yet in the public gallery, but if there is anyone there, obviously turn your phone on mute if anyone does arrive. Apologies have been received from Steve Aiken. I don't know if there are any other apologies or members are aware of apologies.
We've not heard any others.
Yes. So we are waiting on one or two other members to join, but they may join us, but we are quorate, so we can proceed through our business. As always, there may be some refreshments moving in the trolley, so if that noise, please be aware, anyone who's watching online, that it's just the noise of just some basic refreshments being provided. Members, you are obliged, as I said in our last meeting, to declare any relevant interests. So does anyone have any relevant interests to declare in relation to today's business? No? Okay. Now, Chairperson's business is agenda item 3. There are 2 bits of Chairperson's business. Members, I would like your views on seeking departmental and holding departmental learning sessions on key subject areas, e.g. the consolidated fund as it came up. I mean, things like the consolidated fund are techy. They're not. It's not a 3-line whip. People are. We can't make you. That's not one of the rules of this committee anyway. But they are really useful if your diary allows. So what we are going to do is, I think we're going to have them earlier. We're going to stage them earlier than this meeting. So so hopefully that'll be less disruptive for people's diaries. So they'll start at, is it 1 or 1:30?
Some we're going to start at 1 where we have capacity to be in here from 1. Others will be 1:30. So we'll talk about it in the forward work programme later on. But next week it'll be 1 to 2, and it's from our own Ray's coming in to talk to us about budget process and other finance relevant material. Great.
So that will be background sessions on some of the more technical items, and those are a good opportunity for people to get up to speed, and I will certainly be attending as many of them myself as I can. Agenda item 2 in Chairperson's business relates to a matter that was raised by a member and has been raised, and I think it's worth dealing with. It relates to the budget bill final stage debate. A member of the committee made remarks, I think with good intent, but Dr. Aiken spoke on behalf, or appeared to speak on behalf of the whole committee when agreeing to, I believe it was in relation to the Fiscal Council and Fiscal Council legislation. So I think it's important to just note that we are all able to talk and speak as members of the Finance Committee, and indeed as our party's finance spokesperson in many areas. But it's very important that we don't stray into speaking on behalf of the whole committee. There are particular circumstances in which I am able to speak, or the Vice Chair speaks for the whole committee, but those are within very clear parameters. For example, in the debate the other day, the legislation says that I have to read out a particular form of words. I won't ever represent views on behalf of the whole committee that are not shared, and that don't reflect, nor that they reflect. Sometimes there'll be disagreement. So I think it's important just to reiterate that. I'm not suggesting it was done in a malign way, but I think it is important. None of us, and that includes myself, can, unless in particular circumstances, speak on behalf of the whole committee. To put that on the record. Okay. The next item is agenda item 4, draft minutes of the meeting on 14th of February. Members are referred to page 7 of the meeting packs and ask people if they are content that they are a true reflection of the meeting we held on 4th of February.
Agreed.
Okay. I will sign the minutes. So agenda item 5, matters arising from last week's meeting. So members, we agreed to deal with correspondence by email. Members were asked to provide any comments by 3 p.m. on Monday. So there were no disagreements with suggested actions. Therefore, that's in relation to some of the more routine correspondence. So they will be taken forward and recorded. They'll be formalised and taken forward from today's meeting. Now, draft letter to UK Treasury. At the meeting last week, the committee agreed to consider a draft letter to the UK Treasury. This can be found at page 21. Do any members have any comments on it? Okay, I think we can have agreement that it be issued.
Yeah. Brilliant, thank you.
Okay. Item 3 is the first report of the Examiner of Statutory Rules. Members, we obviously heard from the Examiner of Statutory Rules in our first meeting, and she has moved quickly to publish her first report. A number of the SRs that we covered last week are in her report. It can be found at page 31 of the pack. Now, the majority of those rules are referenced with no comment, no specific comment. 2 SRs are classed as being in breach of the 21-day rule. However, the examiner is satisfied that the department has provided a satisfactory explanation for the breach. The examiner has also referenced the confirmatory SRs, which extend the provision for allowing for registration of death by telephone and the provision of documentation electronically. No other issues are raised to the committee's attention. So if members are content, we'll note the Examiner's Statutory Rules report.
Agreed.
Okay, now item 4 is something that we touched on last week, which is SR 2023/137, the Coronavirus Act 2020, registration of births and deaths, stillbirths and deaths, extension number 2 order Northern Ireland 2023, and SR 2349, the Coronavirus Act 2020, registration of stillbirths, extension order Northern Ireland 23, and SR 22-2225, the Coronavirus Act 2020, registration of deaths and stillbirths, extension order Northern Ireland 2022. Members, at the meeting last week, we considered 3 confirmatory statutory rules which extended provisions first enacted during the pandemic, allowing for registration of death by telephone and the provision of documentation electronically. Members agreed to defer consideration of the rules pending clarification from the Department of Finance on the continued extension of the provisions and potential to make them permanent through an appropriate legislative vehicle. The clarification can be found at page 96 of your meeting pack, along with full details in the clerk's briefing note. So members, I would remind you that the Examiner of Statutory Rules has referred to these rules in the first report. These rules were laid during the period when normal Assembly business was not ongoing. That's a very diplomatic way of putting it, Clerk. The Examiner has indicated that SR 2022-225 and SR 2023/49 have ceased to have effect as they were not confirmed within a specified period. However, legislative provision prevails in SR 2023/137, which succeeded the earlier rules. So, have members any further issues they wish to raise in connection with the statutory rule, or are members content with the clarification? Paul Frew.
Thank you, Chair. No, I see nothing. I see nothing in this paper that we have received today to explain why they cannot bring forward a further vehicle of legislation, even through accelerated passage, that will deal with this issue. All they've done is explain the purpose and the memorandum around the actual SR. We know what it does. Doesn't take you long to read through the actual SR and the actual that is included. We have had reassurance that it's only about the registration of deaths and stillbirths through a remote device, phone, and not the way it used to be. And I don't really have any real issues about the provision. It's with the vehicle of which is being used. Coronavirus Act 2020 has caused massive damage to our people through a wide-ranging areas, has increased mental health dramatically, has lost educational capability and also development of our children, has raised mental health through the roof if you talk to any of your trusts, and it's long past the time when the Coronavirus Act 2020 should be in the bin. And there's absolutely no reason why this provision can't be contained in another piece of legislation. If this is going to be the future, why are they using emergency legislation which should be historic by this stage?
So, well, first of all, do any other members want to come in? Owen Tennyson, and then Deirdre.
Thank you, Chair, and I think this is dancing on the head of a pin to a certain extent. The reason why no other vehicle has been available is because we haven't had an assembly for the past 2 years to legislate, and now that departments are back up and running and operating again, legislative programmes will be incredibly tight. I agree that it would be better that we have standalone legislation in order to progress some of these matters, but as there is no objection in terms of the substance, I don't think we should be overly ideological in terms of supporting the extension. And I think we should indicate to the department very clearly that we're willing to support those extensions for a reasonable time to allow them to place these measures on a statutory footing. But I don't think we should be overly ideological, nor do I believe we should be placing unrealistic expectations on the department in terms of the timescale in which they could actually move to rectify this. So, look, I don't want this committee to descend down this road where every week we're meeting to discuss statutory rules which are coming out of coronavirus legislation, when actually the substance of what the rules do are of a benefit to our constituents, and no one is objecting to them.
Deirdre?
Just to concur with the comments that Owen has raised in terms of the issue, nobody, I understand the point being made in terms of looking at this in a normal process by way of legislation, but we are where we are. Obviously the coronavirus was unprecedented. The legislation has extended, and obviously we haven't had an assembly. So I think for the issues that are being raised as part of this, it's valid then that we do give that go ahead to proceed on that basis. And I would say, that there's one perspective in terms of the impact of the pandemic and the response to it. But obviously people did approach that in the interest of the public to save lives. It was an unprecedented period, and I think just to add that balance in terms of the conversation, but we're not here to discuss that. That will come up in other forums. And I would be happy enough, just with what Owen has said there, that we do give indication to the department in terms of the thrust of what's contained within this, that we would be happy to proceed.
Okay, I want to give other people, anyone who wants to talk to this, the opportunity to speak, and then I'll give a view and then make a proposal. Anybody else has any other?
Just on that point of information, Chair, they did have 2 years when the Assembly was running to bring forward a legislative vehicle. And my worry, and a question I would pose to the committee and to the department, is what happens if the Coronavirus Act 2020 falls and does not get extension in March?
I would say there's a couple of things here. Number one is the substance of what this legislation actually does, which is basically make it easier to do notifications of deaths in particular circumstances. There isn't, so far as I can ascertain, a huge ideological division on whether that is practically bad, or most people think it's sensible and it's procedural. There's then the separate, the specific question about people's feelings about the use of the provisions that were in the coronavirus legislation and the use of secondary powers, including SRs and the extension of those. First of all, state my personal view is that given these are relatively uncontroversial and in fact relatively sensible provisions, that it would be unusual for us to place them into massive uncertainty without in a sense because of the principle of the legislative basis that they have. Notwithstanding that, I acknowledge that it would be, and I think the department has basically acknowledged us, they would want to regularise how this provision operates in law. So I would suggest, I think we are going to get a briefing from the departmental official at some point in about a month's time, or a bit over a month.
We're looking at scheduling. I think we've got them penciled in for the 20th of March. We can look at that again. As the chair says, they have no issue with moving to a new legislative vehicle. It's just timing. Is if they can't do that until the existing time scale has worked its way through, so it just delays it slightly. But the official can do a better job explaining that, but they are not averse to that at all. So
I would suggest that my suggestion was we take evidence from the official then, and people can ask legitimate questions about a new legislative vehicle. But in the interim, that my view as chair would be that we move to agree formally. And I'll put the question now, and obviously people, if they wish to have.
Before you do, Chair, and I'm not going to be awkward about this.
Yeah.
It is important to me, as you know, as you all know. If we can apply pressure on the department, I think we all agree that we need a new legislative vehicle. So anything we can do as a committee to apply pressure on the department to do that as quickly as possible is, to me, the optimum.
Well, can I suggest to that end, and as I'm always happy to give people who have particular interests the ability to use this committee to put those on the record. I think that's reasonable, as long as it obviously doesn't take up undue committee. I'm not saying this is doing that, but as long as it doesn't take up undue committee time. But can I, in your contact, Clark, with the official, you can suggest to him that we would like to hear a plan for how putting this I think that's a reasonable
Sure,
thing
we
for us
can
to
go
ask.
back and request that, because the
Yeah.
official has put this in terms of asking what the committee would like to do.
Okay, if he's
So if
asked
we
the
go
question
back in
already,
those
that's fine.
terms, then members, that would
Okay,
that would
so
work.
we have raised that. So can I now put the question in, if people agree formally, that the Committee for Finance has agreed SR 137 2023, the Coronavirus Act 20, sorry, I should read it out properly. The Committee for Finance has considered SR 137/2023, the Coronavirus Act 2020, Registration of Deaths and Stillbirths, Extension Number 2, Order Northern Ireland 2023, and recommends that the rule be confirmed by the Assembly. Agreed.
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay. Thank you.
Members.
Item 5 is correspondence from the NI Audit Office. Refer members to page 114 of your meeting pack. The Comptroller and Auditor General has written to the Committee in relation to the budget of the Northern Ireland Audit Office. Members, in recognition of the independence of the Audit Office, its budget is agreed directly with the Audit Committee in place of the Department of Finance. I will just say one thing, which is that I'm aware that there is concern within the NI Audit Office that before the Minister was in office, there were effectively lumped with a budget over which they had basically no say, and it is significantly short of what they know. This is the case with lots of statutory bodies, but I think there is a very real acute concern about what it means for the NI Audit Office. So I would put that on the record. I think it's, and I put it on the record in the debate the other day, I think it's particularly critical given the role the Audit Office has in terms of, as I say that as a former member of the PAC, in terms of scrutinising the work of statutory bodies and coming out of 2 years of no functioning government, and we had 3 years before that, not so long ago, that it's really important that they are able to do that work. So I just put that on the record. Any of the member wants to? Owen Tennyson.
Thank you, Chair, and completely concur with your remarks in this regard. Look, I understand the challenging circumstances that the Audit Office are in, but they are a really important body in terms of scrutiny, and it certainly informs some of this committee's work as well. So it is vital that they're properly financed and resourced, and like other bodies have come under huge strain. I know that it's causing a particular problem around recruitment because it's public sector and they can't offer the likes of signing bonuses and stuff for auditors that would be available in other sectors. So I was going to propose, Chair, if the committee was minded, just that we ask the department for a response, particularly on the funding arrangements for the Audit Office, and allow the Minister to outline what she's going to do to address it.
I think that's a reasonable question.
Chair, in this respect, the Minister for Finance doesn't have a role per se. It's down to the Audit Committee. They set the budget. I think in the first instance, to give that committee their place, it would be communicating with them.
Can I suggest in that case,
copying it
for the sake of propriety, I think certainly copy it to the Minister would be my proposal. So I think it's important that we do it properly, given there is a constitutional, there's supposed to be part of the challenge though is that they have basically had it set by the department, not by the Minister. In fairness, it was set by the department in the absence of a government basically, and therefore in the absence of a properly constituted audit committee here in the Assembly. So I would suggest that we do forward it to the audit committee response, copying in the Minister, and to tell the CNAG we've done that, but ask that the audit committee keep us abreast of actions they are taking, given the importance of the issue. If people are content with that, grand. So agenda item 6 is the committee's legacy report for 2017 to 2022. Obviously, people won't need me to say of those 5 years, only 2 of them there's actually a functioning finance committee. I refer members to a clerk's briefing paper, page 117 of the meeting pack. I probably should at this point, as we want to declare an interest as a member of said committee. And we have another member who is a member of that legacy committee with us, Mr. Frew, who were involved obviously in discussions around that. It's at page 120 of your meeting, page 120 of the pack. It sets out the key activities, outputs and achievements, very grand. Hopefully there were some achievements of the previous committee, and highlights a range of issues that the committee believe they may wish to take account of committing its priorities. I was going to suggest, so I'll turn to you, Clerk, to give it, but I mean, there are a few things there that you've suggested actions, and it'd be interesting if people give members' views whether they are content. I just give a personal perspective, and others might want to come in. I do think we do need to follow up on the Independent Fiscal Council. Obviously, I attempted to move an amendment on this. It was relatively optimistic that we would get in the budget bill, which is, but I welcome the fact that Minister committed to legislating this. I think it would be really helpful to. I'm not sure we actually necessarily need to write a letter because it should be in front of us for evidence, and we'll have the Fiscal Council themselves. But I do think that's a particularly important one. Do any other members have views on the legacy report or any particular issues in there?
Just concur. I think to get the updates on the different aspects, and obviously what's been highlighted is still really relevant to this committee going forward around the Fiscal Commission, the Council and stuff as well. So I think getting updates in terms of the reports and next steps will be good.
Any other comments just on RHI? I think I would make the point that I think that, and this is a personal view, I think we had paid a lot of attention to what was happening in relation to some of the RHI disciplinary matters. I think it's important that we, now it seems quite a long time ago, RHI, but it's not that long ago, but I think it's really important that we don't just focus, and we do just focus on the kind of the whodunit, as it were, of RHI, vital though that was, and the Cochrane report and all that, and we'd spent a lot of time going through it, but that we follow through on a real programme of work on what it means in terms of civil service reform and competence. It's a relatively boring, apolitical thing, but it's, in my view, hugely vital to the functioning of this place. So I hope we'll have the opportunity to take evidence, including from people like Jill Mend, about that. Okay, so if members are content to note that report. Agenda item 7 is an oral briefing from the Department of Finance on on statutory rule which will stipulate the regional rate for domestic and non-domestic properties that will apply for 24-25. Full details can be found at page 144 of the meeting pack. Members, excuse me, the SL1 is the policy proposal to take forward a regional rate. The executive still need to agree on the poundage multipliers in the context of the wider approach to the budget settlement. This will be provided at a later date. So just to remind people, the regional rates order itself does not set the poundage. It doesn't increase or decrease the regional rate. It just creates the legislative vehicle for it to be increased, decreased, or left alone based on the poundage. So we're going to get an oral briefing from the Director of Rating Policy, who is Andrew McAvoy. Thank you, Andrew. Welcome to the meeting. Andrew, can you take us through the two legislative, the two SLs, SL1 and the SR?
Yep, so thank you very much, Chair and members, for the opportunity to brief this afternoon. You want me just to go straight into the regional rate statute?
Yes. I mean, there might be a couple of other questions on broader ratings policy people come up, but I think the purpose of this briefing is about the regional rates order. So, obviously, drawing any context you think is relevant.
That's fine. I'll just give a wee bit about what we do within the department. I manage a small specialist team, 5 or 6 people, with regard that work on policy and legislation to do with the rating system. Our role really threefold: advise the Finance Minister on rating policy and legislation, progressing legislation to do with rating system through the Assembly on foot of ministerial decisions, and then just progress ministerial and executive policy with regards to the rating system in terms of consultation processes, committee engagement, things like that. So today, just in terms of the actual regional rates, the subject of the SL1, spoken to the clerk just before the Assembly returned, actually, just to sort of flag this one, because when the Assembly returned in 2020, we were in a similar sort of a situation whereby we were having to move forward with this SL1 prior to the regional rate being agreed. So we're kind of in a similar boat now, only the time's tighter. The backstop to this obviously is that rate bills usually issue around April time, start of April. So if the objective is for that to go as a normal process, then this is the reason why the SL1's brought forward as soon as we could to the committee. You're right, Chair, in terms of the regional rates order, it's a pure delivery vehicle for the wider budget decision in relation to the regional rate. That's yet to be taken. So in terms of the way this
does have to be taken before the start of the financial year.
It does. In terms of the process, 5 stages really. In terms of this, stage 1 is what we're doing today, which is the notification, just that the order will be coming to the committee in due course and to the Assembly. It explains what the regional rates order does effectively within the tax system. The second stage is then the agreement on the actual level of the annual uplift by the executive. That dialogue's happening at the moment between ministers. So I know that Dr. Gibson advised last week that that's a priority for the executive. And once that decision is made, then my team will be advised on what that means for the regional rate poundage. That will be inserted into the regional rates order, the statutory rule, and that will be made and laid at the Assembly. At that point, it'll come to the committee for scrutiny.
So it has to be laid before the start of the financial year or passed by the.
Oh no, it'll have to be laid. That will have to be at end of February, very start of March. That the SR will be laid.
That's the SR, but without a poundage in it.
No, the statutory rule itself will have the poundage in it at that point.
So that'll be next week, basically. It'll need to be
once the executive decision's taken. It'll happen more or less within a day or two of that. So the statutory rule is laid. It'll have the poundage. The uplift will be explained as part of that process, and then it goes forward for an Assembly debate in the chamber. And as a financial measure, it's subject to cross-community vote in the Assembly at that point.
So thank you very much, Andrew. It's very useful to members. I've quite a few questions. Just as a kind of default position, has there been a default view about indexation of ratings? Has the default position of the department been that it should be indexed and go up by?
In terms of linking it to an inflationary index?
Yeah.
In the past, I've worked in rating policy divisions for 20 years or so now, and in the past, do you remember the executive had like multi-year budgets for spending review periods?
Those were fond days when there were multi-year budgets.
So at that point, it was linked to the inflationary index that they used at that point was called the GDP deflator that they employed at that point. But since then, with the 1-year budgets and looking in terms of how much needs to be raised by the executive in terms of their overall budget that they're setting for a financial year, it's usually taken just in advance or consulted on as part of the normal budget process.
The poundage, in order for there to be, if there is a ratings uplift of, it could be any percent, I don't know what it would be. Obviously, I mean, the number of 15% has been quoted because 15% would get you this 113 million.
Yeah.
So so say it was 15%, say it was 1%, whatever. That poundage needs to be laid next week in order for that money to be part of the 24-25 budget.
Well, it can be laid. I mean, if rate bills went out late, it would still form part of the budget. But for rate bills to issue in the normal time frame, at the start of April, with the
theoretically,
systems,
you could increase the poundage in April or May.
Well, that happened in 2020-21 because of COVID.
Yeah.
So the budget was sort of.
There was reliefs basically.
Well, no, the billing just went late at that stage.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, taking on board that the objective is to issue bills for businesses and households in a normal, timely manner. Yeah, that would need to be once the executive decides, we'll move immediately to make and lay the order.
So you provided a range of options in terms of uplift.
Yeah, in terms of different profiles. Yeah.
And what that would mean in terms of, can you say what? So we know that 15% equals 113. Is that number correct? That's what's been floated out there. Is that about right? Can we?
15% on both sides of the tax base. Yeah, it's slightly more than that now. It brings in about 117 million, but yeah, more or less.
Domestic and non-domestic?
Non-domestic, 15% on both sides.
15%, okay, they raised it. That's quite strange that they raised it.
No, sorry, in total.
In total, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, so you put 50, okay, sorry, I get you now, you're putting 15% on both domestic and non-domestic.
That's correct.
Can I ask then, have you provided, as the executive now has a range of options in terms of uplift that they're discussing?
Well, I mean, it kind of flows 1%, for example. Now I'll correct myself next week if I'm wrong on this, but 1% on the domestic side brings you in 4.3 million and 1% on the non-domestic side brings you in about 3.5 because there's more reliefs within the non-domestic system. So
Yes.
that's, you know, you can extrapolate that up, you know, in terms
So
of
if it's 1% is 4 million basically.
it's on the regional rate
Yes,
poundage.
then you just extrapolate, you just multiply it.
Yeah, obviously we're concerned with the regional rate poundage. District councils set their own poundages and have done that already.
Are you also giving advice? Obviously, that doesn't mean any advice has to be taken, but have you been asked to give advice on reliefs and what could be done with reliefs in this financial year? Either, you know, making them less generous, more generous?
In terms of relief provision for April, in terms of the timing, if you were to implement new policy, you would need to undertake consultation. I mean, even if it sounds like a good news story with regards to rate relief provision, you obviously have the other side of the coin, which is the people that are just outside the support. You know, so you could give support to certain sectors, maybe apply NAV thresholds.
Do you legally have to consult, though, or do you legally have to consult, or does
Well, it's a requirement of best practice is to consult. In terms of things like emergency provision that we provided during COVID, we had to move just forward without, in the absence of consultation. But for something like that, we would do consultation before bringing in any new reliefs.
And are you using any of the? I mean, you haven't had a direction then that there's an amount that the executive or the minister or the deputy first or
No, the way the department is structured, its budget side, it's really advising on that end of things, and they advise us on the level of the rate to be struck, and then it moves into our system.
This is all very interesting, but I just wanted to check. Did the clerk not say that we were having a briefing on the wider rates issue next week, and we're here to discuss?
Of course
we are, but it'll go even broader
It'll
than
go
this.
even
This
broader,
is
obviously.
very much the regional rate.
Members are entitled to ask the
No,
official,
and
Paul Hayes, the
members
director
are not just the chairman
of rating policy. So it's completely legitimate for members to ask that question, and I won't prevent them from doing so. So I'm going to go to the vice chair now.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks Andrew for coming along. I just wanted to ask briefly, as you're bringing this forward, and you're mentioning end of February, start of March. That's obviously very quick. So does that mean that the recent consultation review on domestic and non-domestic rates, none of that's going to be captured in the 24-25 budget?
In terms of the measures that were looked at in terms of revenue raising, we have consulted on those that concluded at the 13th of February was the closing date for the consultation. You may be able to do something in year if you were to bring something about in year, but in terms of trying to put in and implement, even in IT terms, bringing in systems and stuff for new reliefs in April, be very difficult to do.
Yeah, no, it's just obviously some of them have quite a significant financial impact, and if the decision was to be made, obviously rates bills will be issued, as you say, start of April for the entire year. So
the financial. I mean, so in terms of what that consultation was really looking at was in pure revenue raising terms. You know, it's very stark. It was very much yes, no. If you wanted to get rid of a support, how much revenue would that raise? But even the consultation document itself made it very clear that for those decisions to be taken forward would require further consultation work to be done, but also further impact analysis with regards to, you know, take for example industrial derating. You would want to fully understand the impact on the manufacturing sector to move forward with a proposal like that. So to close a consultation in 13th of February and to do it for the following April, just
no, that's good. I think it's good to have clarity for businesses that if they get their rates bill now in April for this year, and it includes industrial derating, they're not going to get another bill during the year. I think that's kind of the point. I think
that would be very difficult to do. In terms of the I should point out that the small business rate relief for 24-25, that's already been extended at the start of January. Actually, we just weren't sure if the Assembly was going to come back, so that was done with Sec clearance. And that's already in place for businesses, so that'll be automatically applied to rate bills from that go out in April.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right, thank you. Paul Free?
Yeah, just on that same vein with regards to small business rate relief, industrial derating, that's still in?
That's still in the
it's
system.
It's back in the system, so...
Oh, it's in the system, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Can you remind us, because I should remember this but I can't, what portion, what percentage of the household bill is the regional rate compared to the council?
It's roughly, it changes by council to council, but it's roughly 50-50. Yeah.
Very uniform. I suppose my question's probably unfairly put to you around the methodology around what is a significant rate. So what I mean by that is, what is the executive planning for? So they don't have a programme for government. They don't have a costed programme for government. So how do they know the cost of things?
Well, I can't speak to the wider budgetary side, but in terms of the regional rate, I suppose what's driving one element of what's driving that is basically an assessment in relation to how much households could potentially, pay or not pay, and likewise with the business rate sector. I mean, we have quite high business rate poundage as a multiplier here in Northern Ireland compared to England, Scotland, and Wales. So, I mean, there are upper limits to what we can do as well, in terms of acceptability of the tax. But as I say, that's directed largely by budgetary need, and then we come in a little bit in terms of the tolerance of what can be viably raised.
So I take it that we do have, the Department of Finance has a level of budgetary need. They have a figure. They have a figure of budgetary need.
Yeah, I would say that's...
And would that be set in what we actually need to keep everything going as it is? Here's what we have aspired to do, that's how much this will cost, or let's max this out and let's do all bells, singing and dancing?
I'm just not sided on that side of the discussion at all.
Right,
in terms of whether you want to operate on a sort of high tax model or low tax model, or whether you want to, spend more and reduce spend, it doesn't feature within our work.
To be fair on the regional rate, to be fair on the executive, they have over the years frozen the regional rate for a number of years.
It's been the non-domestic regional rate poundage has been frozen since 2021.
Yeah.
It was actually reduced 18% in 2021 as well.
Yeah.
I think you were maybe on finance committee at that stage.
I was, yeah. So I'll not be taking that credit for that. But you never know what's coming around the corner. I suppose then, final question then is, you can understand where I'm coming from with regards to the rationale and the logic that's being used within that executive room as to what should the regional rate be set at, because at the minute I think, and if the question and the only question being asked is, well, how much can our people afford? Well, that strikes me with fear, because I can tell you now, everybody will spend their own pound in their own pocket better than government will ever will. So that worries me with regards to the thought process.
I mean, that would only be one element of their considerations. I would say, But as I say, we only feed in what we can as far as it relates to the rating system.
Yeah. So are you asked a series of questions from the executive?
In terms of how much would this raise, how much would that raise? Yes, that's the type of question that comes to us. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Jerry Carroll.
Thanks. Andrew, we've an SR 2023-39 rather. Do you have any? Can you give some update on that if I have a question?
Rate relief, SR,
yeah.
Is it? Yep. So that is a statutory rule. It pertains to, although it's called rate relief SR, it's actually it's the scheme that operates in the department called rate rebate scheme.
Mm-hmm.
So what that scheme does, it's a form of domestic support that was introduced into legislation in 2017 at the same time as universal credit came into operation. So it basically translates our rate support for annual rate bills into the new currency for universal credit. If we hadn't have done that, the universal or the rate support scheme that was in place prior to that, and is still in place for a lot of people as migration sort of moves across, was the housing benefit system for rates. If we had have kept that as it was, that wouldn't have been compatible with people that were receiving the universal credit.
I mean, just to clarify, I mean, it's a line that sort of jumped out at me. Maybe it's just a technicality, but it says in our pack that Department advises that the rule will ensure that entitlement to rates rebates ends with entitlement to universal credit. Now, just reading it as is sounds like obviously you're getting universal credit, your rates rebate ends, but that's not. It's more connected to.
All that scheme does, in terms of that SR, those are consequential changes to the system to ensure that it continues to work as universal credit legislation changes, so that there's consequential changes, and there's a few things where we just took out provisions that weren't needed anymore, or where we corrected a few things, from the original drafting. But the actual rate rebate system, it just sits on top of the universal credit system for the UC recipients, in terms of providing them with rate support.
Might need to look at it again, but no,
That's
in terms of rates relief and the landlord allowance for landlords, I mean, how much is that in total?
In terms of how much it costs,
Yeah.
just need to flip over a page. Remind myself, 14.2 million is the annual cost of that.
And is there differentiation in terms of eligibility for landlords, or what is, as far as you know, what is the?
Two types of landlords within the system. There's two types of landlord liability. There's for properties with a capital value of under £150,000. The owner is made liable for that property. So if the landlord property falls below that threshold, the owner is liable for rates. A lot of transient tenants in those properties, students, maybe migrant workers, things like that are in properties for sort of short stay, and the landlord provision basically that makes them liable was put in place so that it was easier for the department to collect the rates in respect of those properties, as people sort of were in and out of them all the time. There's also then voluntary liability for landlords, where they can assume liability for rates, and they get the same level of allowance if it's to be agreed with the department by written agreement.
And then just two final points. I mean, empty domestic properties, basically the owners are paying the same rate as the owner of the property that is not vacant, that's being used. I mean, I'm of a view that we should be looking at, taxing, or looking at rates that kind of charge, penalise those kind of owners. But does the department have the power, in theory, to do that?
If a property's vacant at the moment, there's rates paid on that property within.
I'm saying, does the department have the power to charge a higher rate, an increased rate, an extra levy, a tax?
So we don't have that power at the moment, but we're looking quite closely at. I think Wales experimented with additional charge and council tax, maybe some parts of England and Scotland too. The one reservation that I would have on it is, I think you might, if for example, they work that and operate that in the context of, for example, second homes, where people have two homes, and the one reservation that I would have on it is, if you've got a husband and wife, for example, one says their principal residence is in this house, and then in the second home the other one says that the principal residence is in the second home, and therefore you've got two principal residences and you don't raise any extra money.
Well,
but it is something.
It's hypothetical, but also 22,000 empty homes and
it is something that I would.
45,000 empty people.
Yeah, I mean that's why the rates.
Just to clarify,
Sorry,
so
go ahead.
the department has the power to enact legislation on that if it decided
It's
to.
within our competency.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the final question is, the historic monuments are exempt from rates. I mean, how many buildings is that, and what is the rough figure? I mean,
I don't know off the top of my head, but I can get it for you for next week.
Thanks,
Does that include Stormont? It's not.
I don't know. Listed buildings. Listed buildings are in there. I would say it's been valued for rates anyway. Whether it's Chuck paying them, don't know.
I'm very young.
Oh, you feel old, and it's like, okay, Owen Tennyson.
Thank you, Chair. And just following up on Jerry's point, the department has said that the rule will ensure that universal credit claimant couples can't duplicate claims for rates rebate. Could you just speak to whether you believe there's a prevalence of that at the moment?
No, not that we're aware.
Okay, so it's just a tidy up.
No,
of
it's just
the
a
migration.
tidy, yeah.
Okay, no problem. And second and final question for me is just there's been a lot of talk in the media, obviously, about potential for 15% rates increase following the Secretary of State's
Yeah.
comments. Has your department been asked to do any impact analysis or tolerance analysis around a 15% increase, and are you able to speak to what that tolerance would be?
What we have done and what I've provided the Minister with is a bit of work. I think maybe I've sent it to the Clerk as well, in terms of Ulster University Economic Policy Centre had actually just published a bit of work in January of this year, and it looked at the rates liability here in terms of domestic properties. But the other aspect that it looked at was sort of wider economic context. It looked at gross disposable household income, medium wage. It looked at income tax per capita, and I think there was one other thing that just hasn't come to mind at the moment. But that's sort of informing the considerations with regards to affordability. But in terms of the domestic side, we have obviously the rate rebate scheme that we've touched on. We have it's funded at 10% above what the GB council tax reduction schemes are. The executive put that in place as a mitigating measure. We have the low income rate relief scheme. We have loan pensioner allowance. So there's sort of means tested and relief systems built within the rating system where the rate goes up. The award obviously goes up and tracks the rate increase.
Can I just ask one
Yes,
final
can you?
question, Chair, that's just occurred to me? It's a wider rates issue, but just whenever you're talking about some of the release and low income support, the domestic rates cap obviously was originally put in place to sort of mirror the top band of income tax or council tax in England.
Yep.
Do you have any insight at this stage as to how much we've actually diverged since that cap was originally introduced?
I know that so at the moment the highest council tax bill in GB is £5,090. It's for 23-24. The highest Northern Ireland rates bill is 4,219. So that's a two level.
Thank you.
Where is that? Where is the council tax bill in GB? Is that Westminster or Kensington?
No, it's not actually. I think it's in Wales. It's in our consultation document. Yeah.
Yes, we have that. That's all going to be in next week's back for the bigger.
Looking forward to should be back next week.
I'll confirm that. Yeah. But
Jerry Carroll, a very quick
I'm
one.
asking Sir Laird, what is the industrial derating figure? Sorry, what's the total figure for?
in terms of how much they
much is
spend,
that? Yeah,
71.5 million.
so, that's the department covers that.
Well, it's a loss completely to the executive because it comes off the council tax base as well, but then we provide them with a derating grant to subsidise their tax
We'll just
base.
cover the full.
Yeah, we cover the full amount.
Has
Yeah.
the department done any, if there's any other questions, has the department done any sort of economic analysis or got Ulster University to do it about, so for example, the relief that exists, that is it's pretty unique and generous, but
In terms
actually,
of domestic or
I was actually following on the industrial derating,
industrial derating,
the
yeah.
economic benefit that comes from it and how that might be, for example, tied into the dual market access piece, and is that something the department has looked at or been asked to look at?
when I
Like if
refer
there's a
to,
multiplier, what the multiplier effect is and whether there's any dead weight, as they
I
say.
think that's what the value has been in terms of the consultation process, because we have really got fresh, up-to-date information on the sector. But in terms of the manufacturing sector in Northern Ireland, in terms of impact, it's 89,000 employees in the manufacturing sector here. It's one of our biggest sectors. So, as I say, we work with UEPC quite a bit in terms of we are one of their funders. We sponsor them as a department. So it's work that could be in the
It was
pipeline.
quite difficult to analyse, given that, I'm very supportive of it, I think it's a good thing, but given it's been around for so long, it's probably quite difficult to say, it's difficult to analytically say that investment would not have happened, that a particular investment or a particular job wouldn't exist because it's been there for so long.
It's hard to ring fence the two effects. Yeah.
Okay, if we don't have any other further questions, acknowledging that we will have Andrew back here. Are there any other questions? No, we will have Andrew back here
Sorry, can I just ask
Yes.
around the SR 39 that Jerry had brought up?
Sorry, is this the SR on UC?
The rates, the regional rate Relief Amendment Regulations 2023 for its full title, the one that Jerry referred to with regards to the universal credit.
Yep.
We see in our constituency offices this anomaly, this blind spot between the Bureau office and the rates office with regards to this. So if there's an investigation going on with regards to a reclaim of money, they work. The two offices work at different speeds, and then it means then it really can hurt the recipients of universal credit whenever they then realise that they're going to have to pay so much money back on the rates,
Yep.
which then is taken out of the universal credit payments, and it's crucifying at times for people. Does this in any way fix that with regards to even the sight that both departments see of each other? Because that would be difficult, because obviously the rates, LPS will have to do their investigations.
The issue that you're talking about there stems from the decision whenever the welfare reform process was going through, and what happened with it, that was policy was driven largely from Westminster at the time. Rate support used to be within housing benefit, so it was part of the social security system.
Yeah.
They made the decision at Westminster to take that out of the social security system and have it as council-run council tax reduction schemes.
Yes.
So the equivalent happened with us. So it got taken out of the social security system. It was to be managed by DOF. I mean, a lot of this was due with the computer system technology as well.
Yeah.
So as the rollout continues, obviously there's more cases and probably more things like that will come to light. What I can say is we're keeping that under very strict monitoring. We've already done an internal review of the rebate scheme. We're working with our colleagues in terms of the operational side, but I mean, if there are individual cases, you're more than welcome to come to us to see if we can help in any way.
And this SR in particular, 39, do you know exactly what it does on the 10 practically for everybody out there day and day?
It mostly makes, as I say, our scheme sits on top of the universal credit legislation. As that legislation changes, the references change within it, and therefore that SR is really just to keep up with the executive policy intent of our original scheme, but with the changed universal credit regulations.
It seems to allow rate rebate claims to be treated as made if the current rebate reward is retrospectively disallowed, where the decision maker is aware that there could be entitlement. So it's about the 3 months. It seems to be the claimant is allowed 3 months.
That element of it is to smooth over the process.
Right,
a bit,
okay.
yeah.
Which you would hope that would do away with some of the inappropriate claims
Well,
or payments.
yeah, well, we don't know.
Right.
That's
Okay.
To smooth over that element of the process, though. Yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for Andrew while he's here? If not, I think we will. We'll release you in a second, Andrew. But we will. Before that, we will seek your views on whether, in light of the briefing, we are content for the proposal for the statutory rule to stipulate the regional rate for domestic and non-domestic property that will apply for the 24-25 rating year. Just to reiterate, we are not agreeing what the regional rate is, the poundage. We are simply agreeing that a statutory rule can exist to make that rate. We're all agreed?
Agreed.
Good, thanks. SR 23-2039, the one we've just discussed, is subject to negative resolution procedure and came into effect on 1st of April 2023. In her report at page 31 of the meeting pack, the Examiner of Statutory Rules highlights that the regulations were made on 15th of March 23, came into force on 1st of April 23 and were laid on 15th of March 23. The Department has acknowledged in correspondence that the regulations were laid in breach of the 21-day rule, explaining the breach. As indicated earlier, the Examiner is content that the Department has, on this occasion, provided a satisfactory explanation for the breach. Members, are you content with the statutory rule? Any content? I would put the question that the Committee for Finances agreed SR 2023/39, the Rate Relief Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2023, and there's no objection to the rule. Agreed, thanks. Now, thank you very much, Andrew. I think we can release you until next week.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you for giving us a very useful briefing. Okay, cheers.
So,
Okay.
Whenever you go, we're live.
Why, that's right.
Agenda-
Yeah, I know who you mean now. Chair.
Order. Agenda item 8 is a first day brief from the Construction and Procurement Delivery and Digital Security and Finance Shared Services team. Members, at page 222 of your meeting pack, there is background information on the remit, structure and functions of this bit of the department, and it identifies the key issues that it faces. Members, we have the Chief Executive of the Construction and Procurement Delivery and the Director of Digital Security and Finance Shared Services who are attending today's meeting to provide an introductory briefing to the committee. So we have Sharon Smith, who's the Chief Executive of CPD, hi Sharon, and Paul Duffy, who is Director of Digital Security and Shared Services. So thank you very much for coming to see us and giving us an early brief. We would welcome an opening statement from you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to go first, and then if it's okay, I'll pass over to Sharon once I've concluded. So thank you to the committee for providing the opportunity to come before you today to set out the functions of digital security and finance shared services within the Department of Finance. Some former committee members may recall that this was previously known as enterprise shared services. However, over the last 18 months, we have realigned some of the functions within the department. So we've moved properties divisions from this group across to CPD, which Sharon may touch on, and we've moved pensions division and the responsibility for HR Connect to Nix HR. So what that leaves us with is a better alignment of those remaining functions. They're very much digital functions and transformational functions. It gives a better meaningful to the group, which has allowed us then to describe it a little bit better for some of our key stakeholders, who are mainly other government departments and the wider public sector, but we also provide some public-facing services. It's also given us an opportunity to, I suppose, raise the profile of security as a shared service, just given the importance of protecting information and data, and also the prevalence of cyber threats and attacks to both the public and private organisations. So as per the first day brief, I was just going to take the committee through a little bit more detail on each of those functions, just to touch on a little bit of background on each one. So the first group of functions, as per the first day brief, is digital operations. So that's namely IT Assist and Enterprise Digital Development. So IT Assist provides the common IT systems and services to all NICS departments and to over 40 public sector bodies, equates to about 28,000 users of our shared IT network. And given the movement towards digitalising delivery of I suppose, services, and now the movement towards more hybrid working, our reliance on a secure and stable IT environment is critical to the delivery of those services. IT Assist also provides a wide range of other services to departments, including the provision of the likes of desktops, laptops, mobile devices, and collaboration tools, and a range of other software packages. I should, however, highlight to members that IT Assist are not responsible for the line of business systems within each department. So each department will have its own internal IT team, or they'll use external partners to support those line of business systems. We also have a small team, the Enterprise Digital Development Team. So they provide development and support for small-scale applications that can be used across multiple departments. So this is applications which would have a common use across all departments, and it also supports and develops the various government websites. The second group of functions is within digital security and engagement. So under the digital security element of that, we have our cyber resilience and assurance team, who work very closely with external partners to monitor the vulnerabilities to our IT network and also to take action to protect that network. They work very closely with the Cabinet Office and the National Cyber Security Centre and a range of other security experts, as well as advising and providing guidance on cybersecurity to the wider NICS. This team also includes the Northern Ireland Cyber Security Centre. So they work with public, private and third sector organisations, as well as members of the public, to ensure we have a cyber-aware society and business community. This team also then works very closely with our digital inclusion team, who through their Go On NI programme supports people who are not familiar or comfortable with digital technology. So They run a series of events throughout the year in partnership with other groups, which are free to attend but take place in the likes of libraries, community centres and various locations across Northern Ireland. Within this group also sits then the Network and Information System Competent Authority. So this is a statutory function of the department who oversee the regulation of health, water supply and distribution, transport and energy sectors under the NIS regulations 2018. On the digital engagement element, we have two main channels. So the NI Direct website, which provides a single source for government information and provides a means for the public to access a wide range of government services provided mainly by other departments, such as booking a driving test or applying for an Access NI check. As well as the website, we also manage the NI Direct Contact Centre, which supports a range of government services provided by departments and other public sector bodies. And then turning to finance shared services, this function provides standardised financial transaction processing and reporting for the NICS and the wider public sector. The team processes around £4 billion of payments to businesses and individuals and supports departments with fulfilling their financial responsibilities, such as their statutory, the production of their statutory accounts. Members may recall that we recently had a very successful major upgrade to the Account NI system in September last year, which highlighted the importance and the significance of having a stable, reliable finance system for the public sector. And finally, Chair, the delivery of the Integrate programme sits within Digital Security and Finance Shared Services. The programme was previously known as Central Government Transformation Programme, and I note it's on your forward work programme, so I'm happy to provide some details now or talk a little bit more later. The purpose of that programme is to enable the transformation of how we deliver finance and HR services across the NICS, including the implementation of a new technology solution which will replace the two current standalone systems. So we have an Account NI system for finance and HR Connect for HR. My colleagues in Next HR and People Know they are working on the transformational elements of HR, addressing a range of issues highlighted through a number of external reports and internal engagement. The Integrate programme will support these changes through a modern technology solution. It will provide more efficient and effective finance and HR services, make greater use of our data and provide insights, support decision making, enhance the user experience for civil servants and provide more accessible services that are more responsive to agile ways of working. Chair, a very quick summary. So
a brave lot, I think, is to.
There are a lot of functions in it, so there's quite a bit of detail under each.
So I'm sure there's a few introductory questions we'll have, but Sharon, is there anything you wanted to introduce?
Yes. Thank you, Chair. And it's completely different to Paul's, so I can't answer any questions on IT, and Paul can't answer any questions on procurement. But construction and procurement delivery have three main areas of responsibility, and some committee members will be very well aware of what we do. But just to give an overview of those who aren't familiar, we cover procurement, project assurance, and we also look after properties. And as Paul said, properties division transferred over to CPD in November 2021. So therefore there's 6 divisions currently under CPD, and this includes 2 centres of procurement expertise, and you'll probably be hearing a lot about COPEs as they're called. One's construction division, and that looks after the built environment for central government, so that's office accommodation, some courts, prisons, and then we have supplies and services division who buy goods and services for all departments and a lot of their arm's length bodies. What sits outside of that, and sometimes what comes to committee, are things that aren't related to those centres of procurement expertise, and that's anything buying for education, for health, for roads and rivers, for housing executive, for TransLink, for NI Water. So all of those are centres of procurement expertise in their own right. So in terms of DOF, our 2 centres of expertise are construction division and supplies and services division. Then procurement policy division, again probably the committee had previously heard a lot from officials from the policy division, because that looks after the procurement regulations and public procurement policy, and that helps the minister with the procurement board. So again, previous correspondence with the committee and was about the procurement policy and how it's developing. And then more recently, and in very recent times, a commercial delivery group, and that was set up probably at the outworkings of some critical Northern Ireland Audit Office reports about capacity capability, about having commercial expertise in departments, having project delivery professionals in departments. So the commercial delivery group is there to provide project assurance. It looks after the gateway reviews.
Was it created post Auckland before?
It was created post RHI,
Mm.
and for all of the reasons in terms of building up commercial capability and looking at that as part of the profession. And then Property Services Division, who looks after the maintenance of government properties, again within the government, central government and a number of their arm's length bodies. And then Properties Division, who look after the landlord responsibilities for the Northern Ireland Office Estate, which is 95 government offices, and also building regulations, which again passed over November 2021. If I go to then the current priorities that we see in terms of our immediacy in properties first, which is probably more tangible for everyone, an office estate review was carried out probably between 2021 and in July 2022 PermSec signed it off, and what it will say over the next 4 years, now it was a 5-year plan, is that we will reduce our in-scope estate by circa about 40%. And this is the first attempt at us to...
Reducing, that's the next estate or the public sector estate more
The
broadly?
next estate.
Reducing it by 40%?
The in-scope estate, and that's important because it doesn't include the DFC, Department for Communities, Jobs and Benefits offices.
Okay.
So there's 33 Jobs and Benefits offices, and it's very difficult to include that in with the government central estate because that's more about office admin. So there's about 66
And
buildings.
because they're doing jobs, you need to have a benefits office
Local premises,
in
and it's...
Marfelt or wherever, they have to be
Yes.
there.
Now they are, obviously DFC are working on their own consolidation project, looking at, you know, housing executive, libraries, they all have premises in their own regions. But in terms of the estate review, it covers the Northern Ireland Civil Service Office estate, which is 95 buildings, and then out of that scope is the 33 Jobs and Benefits office. And we're looking at reducing that by 40%. And we've already started that. You will see in the recent media there is Clarence Court, Netherley up for sale, Victoria Hall up for sale. So you should see more office accommodation. And we have been criticised about offices after the hybrid working remaining, you know, very much unoccupied. So it is our responsibility to make sure we're maximising our estate and in tandem reducing...
You say remaining occupied, are you talking about the hubs, the
Connect 2 hubs?
Connect 2 hubs, is that what you're talking about?
No, talking about the office accommodation.
Remaining unoccupied, as in...
Not being filled because of hybrid working.
hybrid working.
So full-time occupation didn't come back after COVID, and we wouldn't expect it to. There's a hybrid working policy that allows people to spend some of their time at home and some of the office.
Great. Continue, yes, go on ahead, Sharon.
In terms of the Connect 2, I'm happy to take questions on that.
We will have questions, we'll have time for questions after. So what we'll do is we'll take opening statements, then we'll go round for questions, and if people, rather than kind of divide it up to you artificially, people can just say who their question is directed to, if it's about COPD or about or CPD, I should say, not COPD. Long day. Or
Another area.
no offence intended, or whether it's about the digital team, just to make clear. But we will come to people after we finish the statements. Go ahead, Sharon.
In terms of current priorities, again, building regulations. Members may be aware of recent consultations on fire safety, and that was at post-Grenfell.
Yeah.
And that ran between July and September 2023. And then the further consultation on the conservation of fuel and power that ran from July to December 2023. That's very much keeping with the Energy Act and trying to make sure that our new builds and major refurbishments are as energy efficient as possible, as net zero. These would have been copied to MLAs whilst the Assembly wasn't sitting, and we're currently preparing the Department's responses to both consultations, which we find are broadly supportive, and we plan to bring these to the committee before the summer recess. In relation to procurement, there's a transformation agenda you'll probably be aware of that Cabinet Office are leading on, and Northern Ireland is part of the regulations that will be taken forward. These have been working in the background, and our officials have been liaising very closely with Cabinet Office on the Act, which is now in place since October 2023. They are bringing forward secondary legislation to bring that Act to its effectiveness, and the first of those statutory instruments will be led in Parliament in March, middle March, so we'll be coming to the committee. We've asked for this to be urgently tabled. You maybe received that, to talk you through the legislative consent motion. And again, Michael and Paul are happy to come to give you a very much in-depth, blow-by-blow account of the Procurement Act going forward. Sticking with procurement, current priorities, the Northern Ireland Audit Office came out with a report in April 2023.
Yeah.
And it acknowledges that whilst there's been many successful procurements carried out, it does reflect that the quality of public procurement has been subject to criticism, and in its view, not much has happened in terms of transformation. So again, we'll be coming back to the committee when we have discussed that with Minister and decided the way forward. It did make 4 recommendations, which included that the department should commission a fundamental review to ensure the arrangements support effective strategy setting, policy development, governance and accountability for procurement. And I will say, because this is very much going to be in the fore next week, the Northern Ireland office have carried out work in a follow-up report on major capital projects.
The audit office, not the Northern Ireland office.
The Northern Ireland Audit Office.
Yeah.
And it's the 2019 major capital projects, which was very critical at the pace.
Yeah.
So they would criticise delays and cost overruns in the flagship projects and the strategic executive projects. So it's due to publish a follow-up report next week, and we've obviously been involved in the clearance process for that, and it is likely to be really critical about the pace of delivery of projects here, which, whilst it's no difference across the globe about construction projects, are pretty complex and they're fraught with difficulties. But the head of the Civil Service and the Northern Ireland Civil Service Board are very keen that we take on board any causes for delay that can help us improve delivery of projects here. In terms of committee engagement, this is my last point. In terms of committee engagement for procurement, the committee have asked for a briefing on the Trade Specialist Committee, which is on its way to you, and also we will bring a briefing for you for the Procurement Act 2023, which requires the statutory instruments. There's also a legislative consent motion about some of the trade elements that will require us to amend the public contracts regulations. And then for building regulations, we'll be bringing you back the outcome of the consultations, and also that will help us take the next steps in terms of any amendments that need done to building regs for fire safety and for energy efficiency. And that is me.
Thank you very much, Sharon. Well, Paul, thank you. I should have known when I was asking officials who have very big briefs to give an introductory statement. It would necessarily be wide. Look, there's quite a few things there. I would just say to members, feel free to ask anything that's within the remit of those teams, just to inform yourself or to get a policy update. That's what this is for. One thing to say is, rather than go down, spend ages on one particular topic, but it's up to members. I don't want to curtail people unnecessarily, but we will. I'm sure any high-profile policy issue where it's current and pressing, it's likely we will have either Sharon or Paul or someone who works with them back at some stage in the future. I just have a few questions on each to update myself. You actually said, Sharon, they're totally distinct. My first question actually might be a bit of overlap, and I'm just interested to know, because it is relatively topical, it certainly has been over the last month or two, particularly for yourself, Paul. So we here at a devolved level procure a very large number of IT services from Fujitsu. Do we know that? I mean, presumably they are our largest or one of our largest IT contractors in Northern Ireland.
Yeah, well, Sharon can talk a little bit more about Fujitsu as an organisation, but
yes,
in terms of within the Department of Finance, they support the HR Connect contract.
Yes.
So they have had that contract since 2006. They provide a number of services to other government departments. So they are a major IT provider. And
I know they, for like the police and things, they have a huge and other bits of the devolved state, as it were. Have there been any conversations with Fujitsu, either more recently, obviously a lot around obviously specifically talking Horizon and the post office scandal? Have any parts of devolved government or any contractors or yourselves at a kind of, because you seem to own strategic policy, and is there so I'm aware, for example, none of this sort of strategic supplier relationship. Is there a strategic supplier relationship with Fujitsu?
Yes, we have a strategic supplier relationship with a few suppliers, and Fujitsu is one of them. We also link in very closely to the Cabinet Office, and this morning there was a single government meeting on this specific topic.
On Fujitsu.
So we work very closely with the Cabinet Office. Obviously we're bound by the same regulations in terms of the public contract regulations, which regulate us about what we can do in terms of tendering, but also what we can do in terms of contracts. So that's what we have been working very closely in Cabinet Office, but we have met with Fujitsu about the situation, and so
recently, like in the last couple of weeks, or in the last year or two?
Last few months.
Obviously, several of those contracts will have been re-tendered after we knew about, or it was publicly known about what was happening with Horizon. Okay, it might be useful to be kept abreast of that, but we'll raise that later on within the committee, so people can give their view on what's happening with that, particularly given the sounds like there is live meetings happening and you're engaging with the Cabinet Office on that. Thank you, Sharon. for that, obviously, because they're such a huge supplier, and I'm assuming, but I'm not sure, a disproportionately large supplier, it seems, here relative to other parts of the UK, but that might be wrong, so I'm happy to be corrected. Just on another point of yours, Sharon, which is around, and these are particular areas because it's such broad, on the office estate, Netherley is being sold, 40% reduction in Nick's building capacity. It's worth, I suppose, reflecting, this is like a bit of a hobby horse of mine, the scale of the footprint, and I have always wondered when I've driven past Netherley, and there are lots of talented officials who work in the Department of Economy, but it seems to me really cut off. I mean, it's basically in a kind of gated estate that we feel like we're cut. To me, I think this building's very cut off from Belfast. Belfast isn't a big city. Is as part of that exercise trying to have a kind of view about, if we're going to relocate people or if we're going to consolidate the estate, try and consolidate them in a place where there's an economic multiplier, where there are shops, traders, cafes, pubs, restaurants that can benefit from there being hundreds, thousands of civil servants there, rather than, I mean, if you wanted to buy a sandwich at Netherley, I presume if you want to get one from outside the office, you probably have to get a car and drive somewhere. So that's always struck me as unusual, and the same would be true of Dundonald House, which I know is being repurposed, but it's actually true of Clare House too, which is sort of way out. So is that part of the thinking that we have? But basically our civil service estate is very out of town. Now, there was probably security reasons for that back in the 70s and 80s, but not so much now. So I just wondered if that's one of the policy aims, getting people in a place where there's, and also active travel and public transport is an option, rather than having people get in their car, drive out to a distant location where it's basically impossible for them to buy a sandwich, let alone have a meal or a drink or shop. So anyway, yes or no?
So we're taking this in a few stages. The first stage is to look at our surplus properties and properties that people are consolidating themselves. So Netherley was a good example where DFE had Adelaide House and had Netherley and didn't need both, and that was a prime. And that, again, Adelaide House is a very central location, and it's a really good building. It's energy efficient. We've refurbished it.
Yes.
So some of the decisions are really easily made, and they actually fall into all of the criteria that you've said. There's other locations that we're actually working closely with the local councils in terms of their civic centres, because the citizen, we're indivisible. If you have to do business with government, why should you need to understand whether it's central government or local government?
Yes.
So the longer term plan is that we should be located in the best possible locations where citizens find it easy to get to, and that's not how we've structured our estate. If you look at NI Direct was born out of yellow pages that you really had to know who you were looking for before you'd able to. So that's the technology element. Yeah. Now we're looking at the physical element. If someone needs to come to an office, they shouldn't need to know whether it's rates, whether it's housing benefit, whatever. So the longer term vision is what are we here to do, and how are we here to serve, and does our premises actually accommodate that? You are right. If we're looking at new estate, which we're not at the minute, what we're doing is trying to reduce. We then have to find out, with our retained estate, is it the most energy efficient building? And if it's not, then we have to look to see do we want to refurbish, so it's an investment decision? Is it in the best place for people to access, whether it's childcare, whether it's public transport, whether it's all of the amenities that you'd like to have during the day? So all of those will be a factor, but we are starting from a really poor, you're right, it's a disparate. You wouldn't start from here if you were starting over.
No, indeed.
But so it is a longer term plan, and I know Connect 2 helps maybe a question, but really...
Question as in doing more of them or consolidating them?
Well, the Connect 2 hubs, we have 6 implemented, and at the minute the capacity of usage is 17%. So 17%, yes. So if you were to build a business case...
It's lower in some places because it'd be higher in others. What's the worst?
The worst is about 12 to 14.
Okay.
And that's been, we left it a year before we even started to use these figures, because we thought seasonal, Christmas, Easter, bank holidays, there's always a reason why the state's not occupied.
The availability of home working is sort of all.
Exactly,
you might as well go into,
because Connect 2 hubs were born out of people not having to travel to work to such an extent. If they're able to travel from home, the question is why would they want to travel 10 miles to a hub rather than 25, 34 miles to an office? So we have to change how we think. But long term, again, the vision would be, why would you need to have to go to a hub? as a civil service with a pass, you really should be able to access any government building. Our technology that Paul's working on is agnostic. You can really plug in the networks there, the connectivity's there. You don't need a desk phone. So technology's allowed us to think outside the box, to use our estate in a much more intelligent way.
And my final question, and I'll open up to colleagues, is about the Procurement Act that we're talking about. So that was passed whenever there was no Assembly or Executive to give a view. I mean, is your view that, like, looking at it, I mean, you're talking about being, you know, I'm sure I thought of the legislation open in front of me. It is it's UK government legislation, but it legislates effectively for devolved government, in a what is not a reserved matter, as far as I'm aware. Is that, I mean, are you in a kind of constitutional in relation to the Northern Ireland Civil Service and devolved government? Do you have would the department have had a fundamental concern about the propriety of even legislating in the area in the first place?
The public contracts regulations have existed from the 1990s in Northern Ireland. It's always been a part of those regulations. So for us to come out of the UK regulations would have been a change in the direction of travel, Chair. And our view, and again, I haven't been able to take the Minister's mind on this yet, but our view would be that suppliers in Northern Ireland cannot just trade in Northern Ireland and survive. For sustainability, there's bigger markets out there, so a consistency between the regulations here and the regulations in England, Wales and Scotland will have their own regulations, but makes it easier for suppliers to understand what that rule book is. Mm-hmm. We also benefit from the huge resources that the Cabinet Office has in terms of training resources, legislative and legal resources that we don't have here, and to replicate those would have to be a decision of add cost to the current finance.
Well, this is a bit of a post-Brexit. Some of it is part of them trying to, as I understand it, some of the procurement legislation has been about trying to essentially kind of put the thumb on the scale in terms of how purchasing decisions are made by local authorities. And one of the concerns we heard in the previous Finance Committee was that actually that might end up disadvantaging not so much Northern Ireland buyers as in yourselves as public sector entities, but a construction firm in Tyrone who are bidding for work for Liverpool, Council in Liverpool. Is that concern been addressed, or you still have it? Or
that was a procurement policy note the Cabinet Office brought out about regional procurements below threshold.
Yes,
the regulations will only be brought in above threshold, and for construction it's somewhere around 4.5 to 5 million.
Okay.
But in saying that, Chair, the biggest complaint we have in terms of construction here is that our contractors are actually bidding more successfully in England, Wales and Scotland and the Republic of Ireland. We're actually losing a lot of, they're flying over every Monday, coming back every Thursday. So there doesn't seem to be a barrier to our construction firms because they're very good.
Yeah.
Trading into Scotland, Wales, England and the Republic of Ireland.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. I'm going to take others in. Diane, first, the Vice Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thanks to the both of you. Paul, I just want to say I am, as newly elected to this mandate, I think NI Direct is excellent. It's been really, really useful in navigating the way around when you're setting up a new office, and I just want to say that whenever you made reference to it, I think that it's really great.
For casework as well, some of the stuff lining up, of course.
But no, I just wanted to say, because I think it's really, really fantastic. In terms of the shared HR function, I just wanted to ask around that. You talk about it being NICS central and some other bodies. I just wondered to the extent of the other bodies' scope for further rollout, because once you start going into the different health bodies and moving between the different health trusts, I think the HR function when staff are moving around poses a lot of issues that end up in my constituency office. So just wanted to ask you about when you're saying the shared function in other bodies, how far does that go?
It's largely into the wider sort of central government sector rather than health and education. So health and education will have their own, in a sense, HR functions, services and systems for their sectors. So we originally were just the NICS departments, but it has rolled out to the likes of the Housing Executive and other public sector bodies, but not into the education and health sectors. Right. There would be, obviously over a period of time, there is opportunities perhaps to look at having a wider public sector shared service network, but at the moment it's purely within central government.
Okay, thank you. No, it definitely seems good scope for efficiencies, in fact, of sharing that out. In terms of Account NI upgrade, was that a routine upgrade or substantial with changes to services?
It was a substantial upgrade, but the services didn't change. It was a substantial upgrade just to the databases and I suppose the system itself. So the system, as I say, was implemented in 2006, an upgrade I think in 2013, and then an upgrade very recently. We would like to think that's the last of the major upgrades, but we still need to continue investing in the system because it's quite old and there are elements of it that will go out of support. And I suppose for me, my priority is the integrated programme and the replacement solutions, because at some stage these systems become obsolete, so we need to prepare for that replacement. So the integrated programme, one of the main objectives of it is to replace the Account and I system and the HR Connect system with a single system, so we have data on finance and people in the same place, which helps then provide much better information around how we manage our workforce and things.
That's great, thank you. And Sharon, in terms of reducing the estate by 40%, I just wondered, is there a disposal policy on this, or is it just all for open sale? I don't know if you're working with other bodies or local councils as to the impact on that.
There is a disposal process that's run by Land and Property Services, so it's called the D1 process because that's the name of the form, it's civil service. So what happens when we have a surplus public asset, we then go through the D1 process, and that puts it out to all other public bodies and the community and voluntary sector, and then they go through a process. It's like 20 working days for the first, and then they express an interest, and then it's 40 working days for questionnaires. And it really comes down to the, are you able to receive it in this financial year whenever we're looking to get the capital receipts, and do you have the funds available? So that if you get more than one application, you go through a sifting exercise, and then you land on the preferred solution. And then if nobody comes in, like what happened Clarence Court, Victoria Hall and Netherley, we put it out to open sale. There's on the internet, if you go onto Land Property Service, you can actually click and see what's currently going through the disposal process.
That's good, because I know obviously that there was a lot of calls and commentary around social media where if you're short on social housing, why aren't you handing it over? So it's good to be able to be clear to people that you have went through that process, to be able to answer that clearly. Also on the Procurement Act, I just wondered, I know you're going to be talking about it in detail later, could you outline briefly any benefits for our micro and small businesses in our local communities on this? Will this be the game changer for them that they're hoping for?
Well, that's one of the biggest selling points of the Procurement Act, because previously under the EU rules it was very prescriptive and very bureaucratic, and the main complaint was it's just too difficult, there's just too much red tape, and that's what the Procurement Act was supposed to do. It's supposed to make it simpler, more flexible, it's supposed to be more commercial, it's supposed to look more at the outcomes we're trying to deliver, and your procedures should be able to be flexed and tailored to suit what you're trying to buy. But in saying that, the last the procurement board put forward procurement policy notes to make it simpler to look at commissioning of social and community-based services, which are more suited to the real small micro businesses. The regulations will contain flexibilities. The big test for us as a jurisdiction and as civil servants is whether we take the flexibilities that the regulations allow us to do. And there's some criticism that we are very risk averse, and that's because we believe we're a very litigious society. And yes, we do get a lot of legal letters trying to stop procurement being awarded, and that drives behaviour that we're very focused on the process. So there will need to be a culture change, because the regulations can be the most flexible in the world, but if your process is the most prescriptive, we're not going to benefit from that. So there's a huge training exercise and a huge hearts and minds piece that we will have to bring other centres of procurement expertise along, because you could simply do what you're doing today and still comply with the new regulations. So it will require change in behaviours, but the regulations will allow you to be far more flexible. You will obviously get people saying, well, it'll be tested in court, and yes, it will, but that shouldn't maybe make us risk averse to try something different, to be more innovative. The big thing for me in SMEs and particularly the micro businesses is the pre-market engagement and getting them involved. And sometimes they don't have the capacity to look out to see what's coming across the horizon. And I think we have to be better and more transparent with our pipelines. And there's some parts of the Procurement Act that Northern Ireland haven't gone along with the Cabinet Office in England, because they are policy matters, not because the reason that we're going with the Procurement Act is because really it takes us aligned very much to the trade agreements and the government procurement agreement, which we have to do trade as part of the UK. But there are policy levers in there, like transparency, like doing things for SMEs that we can do as devolved administration in terms of our policy. So we're looking forward to when the Minister gets around the portfolio, looking really closely at what the forward work programme for the policy is. Because the regulations are procedural rules to tell you how to do it, when to open and close a competition, and how to manage a contract, which is a new, but it will really mean how we're going to use procurement to maximise economic drivers, social, environmental, everything that's within our gift to do.
Thank you. Hopefully it'll see things streamlined, you know, on our big health and education projects and getting them delivered. I've just one final question. When you mentioned the Northern Ireland Audit Office report that's due to come out and is going to be quite critical on capital projects here, have you an idea of what the headline figure is going to come out with, how much that they're going to say has been lost because of capital projects?
And advise that's embargoed until the report lands, but it's a significant amount of money. And again, we're looking at this. This is not untypical of capital projects, but it's not acceptable just to say that and not do anything about it. So we are working with senior officials. We've actually an event tomorrow with senior responsible owners looking at the root causes of delay. We've got SIB presenting. We will look at what the root causes of delay. We'll look at what mitigating actions that we've already put in place. I don't think we're really good at sharing information around departments, and we're hoping to be better at that. So the network of senior responsible owners, the fact that the NICS board has set up a subgroup to look at this in particular, and to look at things like an infrastructure commission and how we do this better and more intelligently and prioritise. I think for me the biggest game changer here is the investment strategy for Northern Ireland, which is in draft. And if we get that approved, that will really give us the impetus to change how we deliver projects.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Jerry Carroll.
Thanks for that, Sharon. Most of my questions will be to yourself. Any review of PFIs and PPPs? Last time I checked, we're paying £315 million per year on them. It could be more. I think in total we're paying at least 4.4 billion on top of the value for projects, and the most part I think have been completed. So to anybody with a basic sense of economics, and I do have the most basic sense of economics, that seems to be an absolute rip-off. So is the department looking at reviewing them? Can they cancel them? What is the process if a department decides that it's no longer value for money, which I don't think they ever were, but is there any work ongoing in the department around that issue?
Well, in terms of the Department of Finance, we have only one P, I think it was at the time, and that was the land web, which the committee, I think the Public Accounts Committee looked at. It is coming to a close, and the LPS is looking at a new arrangement. It won't be a PPP or PFI. Northern Ireland wide, I don't think there's any further being taken forward, but Department of Finance wouldn't have any responsibility for anybody else's PPP, PFI arrangements.
So the department just does its own, doesn't take charge of any education or any other PF?
But
if they set a policy to outlaw it, then obviously they would...
The only controlling element with managing public money NI, and I know in the recent update in NPM NI, PFI and PPP weren't mentioned because I do think Cabinet Office have taken a view on this, specifically to the point you've raised. So in relation to our own, it's coming to an end and we don't intend to do any further.
Well, that's fair enough. In terms of policy though, if the FI, Department of Finance, set a policy to say this is not good value for money, this isn't best practice, departments presumably will have to follow that.
Well, they'll certainly have to build a strong case to do one.
Okay. The other question was, you talked about maintenance of government properties. I mean, obviously it's hard to talk about what every property needs because there's differentiation and that, but I mean, broadly speaking, what's done in-house and what's done out-of-house in terms of maintenance of government properties?
We outsource our maintenance, property maintenance. We've got a team who look after that, and we've got a team of quantity surveyors and engineers. This is in public service or property services division, and they will check the work that's been done, and they will check to see what the accounts are. We would like to maintain our buildings more. We'd like to do more in terms of plant preventative maintenance, but our budget has constrained that, and that's another reason that we have to reduce our estate, because if you have fewer buildings, you can maintain them a lot better. But the majority of them, and they're done through frameworks. We had a framework with 2 suppliers. We've just retendered that and brought in 3 suppliers to give us a bit more continuity. But that's how it's done.
I appreciate that. And in terms of the maintenance figure, I mean, do you have a rough figure what it is? Because I imagine there's a lot of replication, and I would imagine it'd probably be more beneficial to the public purse if that was done in-house through a process of recruiting, I don't know, painters, decorators and the other sort of more intense work. So What is the figure for maintenance, and is there any work to look at making this mostly in-house?
Circa around 7 million, and that is a really low figure when you're looking at 95 buildings. That's really health and safety type measures. That's maintaining your lifts, that's doing your Legionella, that's doing all of your electrical works. We don't have any plans to insource that. I know Housing Executive might have a hybrid model that we could look at, but we believe it's not our core business. That's not generally what we do. So we believe, and it's been outsourced for as long as I can remember, must be 3 decades.
Yeah, I mean 7 million, could probably be done cheaper and nice, but I take your point on the overall figure. Finally, maybe the chair or the clerk can direct us. The Procurement Act is coming to us as an LCM. Is that correct? And do a time frame?
Because it's a UK Act, and it's already in position. Anything new that comes from that will come as a legislative consent motion. It will be brought by the Minister, and the committee will then consider its view on that. We will issue a report. There's a whole process around
a date on
that.
that yet? Correct? No.
You're talking imminent.
Urgent.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Thanks.
We will be able to withhold consent, but it will have sadly very little
It doesn't necessarily
legal impact.
have it absolutely, as the chair says.
Okay. Next is Nicola.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Sharon and Paul, for your very informative overview there of what you do. Paul, I'll ask you first. I see in your list of priorities for 23-24, one was to increase cyber resilience, and I suppose there's been a lot of talk recently with like increased data breaches and hacking, most notably I suppose with the PSNI and that there in the last few months, whatever. What have you been doing, or your department been doing to increase or improve your cyber resilience?
So we have a range of measures in place. We have obviously a lot of technical solutions in place to protect the network. The most prevalent way of a cyber breach occurring tends to be through phishing emails. So an email with a link, and I'm sure we've all seen them personally come into our inboxes. That tends to be the most successful way. So a lot of it is about not just having the technical solutions in place, but also about behaviours. So we've been doing a lot of work around educating and raising awareness among staff of the risks associated with clicking on links that you're not familiar with. We run a number of what we call phishing exercises, where we will deliberately send out what looks like a suspicious link. We've baselined that to look at what's the sort of numbers of staff that tend to click on those, and then we're doing a series of awareness and training to see how we improve that. So if a member of staff happens to click on one of those links that we've sent out, it takes them straight into like a small training update. So it raises their awareness. And I think one of the things that's really important to do is not to stigmatise that somebody's done something wrong. So what we want is, if somebody was to click on a link, that they're quite happy to put their hand up and say, I've done something wrong, because the last thing you want is to drive their own behaviours and people hide what they've done, because then it takes longer to respond to it. So we're doing lots of stuff around technical protections, but also around awareness and educating staff.
I suppose that just shows how sophisticated the phishing emails are now, that they can catch many people out. You think you're aware of it, and you just can be fooled very easily.
It is.
No, appreciate that. Thank you, Paul. Sharon, I want to bring you back about the office estates as well. I'm assuming it's in the same area in Oma. 2 of our offices, I think, are moving now to the town centre. And I suppose it's in a bid to save money, which obviously is a very sensible thing to do. But I wonder what the consultation process was for that there, and are staff widely supportive of the move?
Yeah, I haven't heard. Normally, if staff aren't, I normally get the letters from chief executives, grade 5s or grade 3s. So it's Sperrin and Boa Sonoma, and they're moving to County Hall. And the beauty of the County Hall one is we're given an opportunity to improve the fabric of the building, which means energy efficiency, and it should also be more comfortable for staff. Like, terribly, we have some staff in buildings who have blankets on their knees and hot water bottles because the buildings are poorly heated, and when you do heat them, they're overheated and they can't open the windows. So I think it's really important. Both those Sperrin and Boas are leased properties. So again, one of our biggest, this is the biggest cost, is to get out of the leases as soon as we can and move into our retained estate, which we own, which is a lot more economic, and we can invest in it, not knowing you have to exit it and then pay dilapidation costs. So what we're going to do in Oma is take more time to actually improve the fabric of the building. We're going to move some people from Boas into Sperrin or vice versa when the lease comes up. It may mean 2 moves, but at least when they do their final move, it's into a building that's a lot more conducive to modern office accommodation. Consultation with staff is really important. It's not as difficult now to move staff around when people have the opportunity to work from home, because when disruptive work's happening, or they maybe only have to go into a new office 2 days a week, whereas previously it was 5 days a week. So it's, I think staff are more willing to, because they do have the opportunity to work from home, they're more willing to work with us. And it's not only about saving money, it is about making sure the accommodation is fit for modern purpose.
The Town Hall Noma as well, I think, is the base for one of the Connect 2 hubs. Will this have any effect on users be able, or staff be able to use the Connect 2 hub?
There may be a capacity issue. It may be difficult to keep the Connect 2 hub in Orchard House because we're trying to use that to maximise the footprint. But it is back to who's using it and for what purpose.
Yeah.
And again, if it's 17% usage, we don't have the luxury of allowing that just to sit idle. But I do think your main point is consulting with staff and keeping staff updated with how we're progressing the office estate consolidation.
Okay.
Sorry, one more final
Yes, of course,
question, Chair. It's on, I suppose, another thing about the procurement is about ethical procurement at the minute. Obviously, there's a massive discussion about that there with everything that's going on in the world with Ukraine and in Gaza and on human rights abuses. So is the department looking at that? They're looking at ethical procurement and kind of how we could move that there forward?
It is core to what we do, where anybody that's working in the procurement does ethical procurement, and that's part of their accreditation once a year. But in addition, I think if we look at the 5 procurement policies that the executive brought forward last time, one was on supply chain resilience, and that was exactly looking at the supply chain. Where are you getting your supplies from? And that links very closely into modern slavery. If you look at the Transparency Index for supply chains, you will know what countries are higher up in terms of the risk of modern slavery, and anything that we're doing to source that far away should be part of the evaluation process. That then feeds into the carbon miles travelled. All of it links together. So in our suite of procurement policy notes that the executive has agreed is supply chain resilience, which is exactly that. No more supplies are coming from, not only about supply chain disruption, but modern slavery. And then there's also a human rights policy note that links into understanding where we're training staff, making sure suppliers are aware and are have a care for human rights in the supply chain. So they are very much forefront of everything that we do.
Thank you for that, Sharon. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Just on that briefly before I go, so if there was some of the anti-BDS laws that have been sort of threatened or mooted by the UK government, it would be, I suppose, your department that would have to engage or implement them if they were UK-wide. And I'm not asking you to speculate on a law that isn't presented yet, but as in, if these laws which are designed to prevent public authorities from saying they're not going to procure from Israel in current circumstances, that it would be your bit of the department that would have to respond to that. And
if it links into procurement matters, it would be our part of the department that does that, yeah.
Okay, and there isn't a policy at the minute yet on that specifically. Okay, we may follow up on that with you. Paul, and then Deirdre.
I'll start with Paul, if that's okay, because you've been very quiet there for the last wee bit.
Right, Paul, you.
Left out.
Paul, you head up a branch of this department that's just under 600 staff, and you have responsibility for finance shared services. What does that actually mean with regards to what you perform in-house and what you contract out to companies that the Chair had alluded to earlier, that Fujitsu? So what's the percentage ratio and how and scale of importance as to those procedures?
Yeah, so the finance shared service function provides, as I say, the transactional processing on behalf of all departments. So the department receives in an invoice, then the invoice is processed through our account and I system that we look after. There's about between 100 and 120 staff within that area. It's all fully insourced. There's no outsourcing whatsoever. The system itself, the account and I system, was developed and is supported by BT since 2006. So it's a fully insourced service. And as I said earlier, we process around about £4 billion of payments out to businesses and individuals. But that's all on behalf of departments. Within each department, they will have their own retained finance function for the other finance services they provide, but the transactional stuff all happens at the centre because you benefit from that economy of scale and a single system.
So I paint the picture of a tree. You're in charge of the trunk.
Yep.
When's the last big crash you experienced?
The system hasn't crashed, as in there had been infrequent outages, but I wouldn't call it a system.
What does a frequent outage mean?
So if we lost service to department, say, for several hours.
Several hours.
Yeah, the biggest disruption has been the upgrade, which was almost 3 weeks. The system's down, and I have to say in this modern day and age you wouldn't expect a system of that significance to be down for that length of time. The challenge we have is it is an old system on old hardware. When we move to a new technology solution, what we won't do is we won't be buying a system, we'll buy a piece of software. So every quarter what you'll find is you will have updates to that software. It's a bit like an app on your phone. So as new functionalities released, it'll be a software update. So it'll run in the background so you don't have the big downtimes that you have now with system upgrades.
And why was it only down for a couple of hours? Is that a defence structure within the apparatus, or was that something your people were allowed to or able to fix quickly, or is it just, do you go on your knees and pray?
No, well, there'd be it could be a variety of reasons why the system could go down. It could just be a component or an element of the system has failed. But we've got a really good support team that's very technical and knows the system because they helped develop it. So we tend to have quite a good resolution to those issues. But obviously a 2006 system, the longer it keeps operating, the more frequent those issues potentially could happen.
What keeps you up at night?
In respect of the finance shared services?
Of your whole department?
Probably cyber would be the
what, sorry?
Cyber would be
Cyber
the
attack?
biggest concern,
Yeah.
because it's, if you talk to the National Cyber Security Centre, they would always talk about when it happens, not if it'll happen. It is fairly prevalent. We see lots of organisations, public sector organisations, private sector organisations that are attacked on a very frequent basis. I think
Pretty basically, I remember used to work there. The British Library hasn't been able to operate. People follow that story. Main, huge public institution.
The UK would be the third highest region that's attacked through cyber attacks.
So not to give away any national security secrets or anything like that in this committee, but is there a backup plan for that type of scenario?
So we do have cyber incident management plans and response plans. We have teams who are trained with cyber experts. We have direct access to the National Cyber Security Centre in the Cabinet Office. We have external providers who are on standby contracts. So we have a whole range of measures. It just depends on the circumstances of the attack, how you would deploy them. But it is something that we are very vigilant about. To say we have a solution procured through a separate contract through BT, who monitor our vulnerabilities and our traffic across our network, try to spot things. So at the moment, the NICS receives into our network probably between 90 to 100 million emails every month, and we block 97% of those.
Right, okay, wow.
So now lots of those will be spam and
Yes, sure.
commercial things, but that's
From MLAs.
there's no particular individuals listed.
So if the systems are running and not going down, is there a worry that the systems are going wrong? Not necessarily going down, but going wrong. Data being changed, data being wrong, which brings you to a different outcome, which obscures your outcomes. Is there any worry of that?
Well, a lot of the software that we would have in place for the protection looks at patterns and looks for those sorts of things that are out of the ordinary. So anything like that then gets flagged and then is investigated as to why those circumstances have arisen.
Right, okay, thank you. So Sharon, I'll come on to you. The two acts that we will be looking at over the next couple of months, I'm sure, is the Procurement Act and the Energy Act. In answer to Diane, my colleague, you talked about the Procurement Act. We worry here about legal challenges because sometimes legal challenges, many of them are credible enough. They're all credible enough, in fact, if they get through to, but they delay everything, and sometimes it's a tactic people use. Will the Procurement Act make it, if that's the parameter for which you can operate legally, in your opinion, do you think the Procurement Act will actually help with our problem with regards to the stagnant nature of moving forward whenever everything can be challenged?
I suppose that's the reason that procurement contract regulations and the new Procurement Act exists, to legislate, to allow people to call out poor performance. What will be different this time is that there's a procurement review unit.
Yes.
And perhaps suppliers will be more willing to look at the review unit to criticise or to look and to scrutinise the behaviour of some contracting authorities rather than to go straight to litigation. There are some provisions within the new regulations to speed up the court system. However, that only applies to the court in England. Our courts operate differently. For me, I think if we are the biggest thing running through the Procurement Act is transparency. Transparency, and tell us what you're going to do, tell us when you're going to do it the way you've told us, communicate with all of the supply base all of the time, which is really labour intensive. But if we get it right upstream, then there's less than can go wrong further downstream. So when you go out with what you said you were going to go out and a supplier challenges, that should be time barred, because we're back to the date of knowledge, and some of it can get rather technical. But a court would not look sympathetically on a contractor who knew 6 months ago what we were going to do, how we were going to evaluate it, what criteria we were going to use, how we were going to score it. They didn't get the outcome they wanted and they were going to take a challenge. So we may need a few run through the courts, and our courts not to be sympathetic towards them, because the contracting authorities would say when they go into court, they've already gone through, the outcome will be that we won't get the injunction lifted, or we'll. So some people try and abandon the competition and then start over again, which is another delay.
Yes.
I think we'll probably just need to run through a few under the new Act, the new statutory instrument, to see how the courts are going to react to them.
And is that the mindset of the department and the executive as a whole?
The departments would say that if they're challenged and they see any vulnerability, rather than going to court, they will abandon the competition and rerun.
Which is a problem for us all, as always caused stagnation and delay with regards to, but again, it's one of those things that can't be done. Is there any sort of awareness raising being done within the department to inform businesses and companies of this new world order with regards to the Procurement Act?
And this is the benefit of being along with Cabinet Office. They have a huge amount of resources, so they've got what they call knowledge drops. So there's knowledge drops for contracting authorities, which is 45 minutes, 6 modules. You've knowledge drops for suppliers, and then you've knowledge drops for people who maybe oversee procurement. They're all available on the Transform and Procurement website in the Cabinet Office, and we've directed all of our suppliers through Tenders NI to tell them that they're there. The SI will come in March but be effective in October, and there's a 6-month window where we can start to really educate our sectors. So in terms of what we buy, and we buy advertising, we buy IT, we buy FM services, we will be going to the sectors and saying there's new competitions coming up, and they will be run under the new regime, or they'll be run before the new regime, and this is the difference. Even on the website they have what Northern Ireland is exempt from, certain parts of the Act that England has done as policy levers that we haven't joined in on. There's a huge amount of information available.
Okay. On the Energy Act 2023, which is a massive piece of law which affects the market and providers and everything else that goes with it, how does it affect the Department of Finance and you, the umbrella department for the rest of the province?
So we will bring an executive paper, but in terms of the Energy Act, the building regulations, there's 3 phases in terms of conservation of fuel and power. The first uplift happened before the executive fell, and it was a very small uplift. I think you were on the committee that debated it, in terms of the PV, so renewable sources for new builds or major refurbishments. The next uplift will take us a bit further, and there's consultation carried out. They're generally supportive. You will get this is difficult because we're facing supply chain, labour issues, cost of doing business. It'll never be a good time to change the regulations. Yeah. But with the Climate Act and the commitments that we have for 2030 and 2050, this is inevitable. So there's criticisms of not now, and there's criticisms of we're not moving quickly enough. It is a very ambitious programme because it will bring forward major changes, significant changes in terms of energy efficiency. And the reason we're slightly delayed in phase 2, because phase 1 hasn't bedded in. We've got a lot of feedback we're working with suppliers on, working with the construction industry on from phase 1.
Is there any obligation on the department with regards to smart technology?
Not to my knowledge, but that would be better placed with the building regs experts.
Yeah, sure, of course.
We'll get very technical with you if you want.
Well, one other question on the issue which I think is very important. Whilst I agree totally about the hybrid working system and people being able to work at home with technology there. I think there is a massive fear in this with regards to mentoring and apprenticeships and mental health. How do you realistically keep an eye on your staff and their mental health if you only see them through a computer screen? I think it's a massive issue. Mental health's rising at the present time, and I think that's a massive issue with regards to workforce.
Hopefully, Jill, people in the organisation of P&OD will be here. They're reviewing, that's one of the policies that they are reviewing. We have done our people survey and people have opted to continue on, and they were asked the question, would you want to come back to work full time? I think there was your single figures.
I think in fairness, Paul, it is good. It's an important question. It's probably more one for the people team, for people like Jill and the HR people.
Okay, I'm happy enough to leave it there. Thank you.
Paul.
Thank you very much.
Now, Deirdre, and then Owen.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. And Paul, just for yourself, I suppose around the cyber security, but just the artificial intelligence, anything that's coming online around that, and I suppose resilience in terms of that, and just the connection. I know there's the cyber security centre here, companies that are here, and there's a real, I suppose, cohesive group there, or ecosystem working on that. So it's just even the role of the universities and learning institutions and making sure that a lot of that capacity and wealth is retained here and not necessarily extracted to other places. So just to get a sense of all of that.
Yeah, well, artificial intelligence is the new shiny toy at the moment, and the topic that everyone wants to talk about. I suppose it will create more cyber risks potentially for us, because phishing emails and things are going to be a lot more sophisticated. But there's also opportunities to use AI to crunch lots of data and help you with your cyber defence. So it has opportunities and it also has challenges. We are doing a little bit of work at the moment, testing some proof of values using artificial intelligence within the department. So we're using it to look at some of our HR policies and how best we can use it to navigate those policies for civil servants. So if they, instead of searching through a 20 or 30 page policy, it can find the information they need much quicker and present it to them in whatever is the best way of presenting. We're also doing some work in land and property service using sensors and AI to analyse the building, so in terms of environmental issues and things like that there, and occupancy. So we are testing it out, but we're also cautiously doing that as well until we are sure we have the right guidance and safeguards in place. We're doing a lot of work with the Cabinet Office, who are leading on this on a UK-wide basis, and learning from some of the stuff they're developing at the moment. And you did mention the Northern Ireland Cyber Security Centre, so it does do lots of really good work with the community and small businesses, really to raise awareness around cyber security, particularly for individuals who are not comfortable going online. So we have a digital inclusion team who help people get online, and then we have our cyber team who then help them stay secure while they're online as well.
I was going to ask that in terms of the public facing, and particularly around NI Direct, but even across government departments where there's that interface with the public, and the link with the Cyber Security Centre then, in terms of building that capacity at a citizen level, and as you say, that awareness, because that's where you're seeing a lot of people falling foul in terms of losing a lot of money. But even then again, that trust then with government departments and institutions and stuff as well. So it's just the level, I suppose, of engagement, and even the engagement with the voluntary and community sector, trade union movement more broadly on these issues as well, and not just the small to medium kind of private sector. Yeah, no, and we do lots of work delivering in partnership with other groups, and we use libraries quite a bit because that's where you get a lot of community interaction. So it is something we try to leverage what we have in terms of a very small team, but by using other partners to help deliver that message out to keep people safe online. Okay, thank you. Sharon, just for yourself then, in terms of the progress on the transfer of building regs to DFC, is there a timeline in terms of, or at least is the agreement final and through, and is there a timeline then?
Well, now that we have ministers back, because the last correspondence between ministers on this topic was to move it to DFI, and it was really the work that we did on the expert panel for building safety that sort of look to align more to the housing and the building safety residential interim team that now sits with DFC.
Yeah.
So we're working at an official level to make sure that those arrangements are still in place, and then we'll take it to minister so it hasn't been bottomed
Okay.
out. As I say, the last ministerial correspondence on it was to DFI, so we just have to make sure that all ministers are familiar with the expert
And the changes
panel
in
and the
between
changes.
time, yeah. That's sound. And just around the whole issue of procurement and stuff then as well. And obviously, when we procure, I think it's over 3 billion, in excess of 3 billion in terms of goods and services. And I suppose it's the whole social value end of that. I know there was a shake-up of the procurement board back in 2020 and there were changes made. And it's just then, are there additional changes to be made to that to make those bodies and boards more representative of society and in terms of a fair economic system? So just around I know the last time it was social enterprise and all of that was included, and I think that's good. But just even the role again of the community and voluntary sector, human rights kind of perspective, and also the trade unions as well. So to get a sense of anything's going to come forward. And again on the social value, I know it was set at 10%. So just has there been a review in terms of the impact or even difficulties around capacity for organisations and different sectors to adjust, and the likelihood of increasing the 10% threshold? So just to get a sense of that as well. And then again, I suppose it's just looking at it even in terms of the estate as well, and how we build in greater social value in terms of how the estates that we no longer need in terms of staff and because of all the reasons you've set out. But are we aligning or engaging further around community planning, local government in terms of shared bases in terms of delivering good public services, but again also identifying other social needs? I know it was touched on earlier in terms of housing or any other kind of social need, culture and art spaces, all of those types of things, and how we can use our public assets and estates to do that as well.
I'll take your state one first.
Of course.
The greater social value in the estate, because you'll know that social value is economic, social and environmental, and with the Climate Act, the environmental is really, really important in terms of our estate to make sure we have an energy efficient estate. And we will look to do that, first of all, by reducing the size of our estate. The knock-on effect is we reduce the carbon. But then when we get our retained estate, it's to make sure that that is as carbon efficient as possible. In terms of the sharing and the social aspects around the use of the estate, if it becomes surplus, that is through the disposal process. And we've got 2 in the D1 process that other third sector have approached and asked, through the D1 process for the use of that going forward. So that will be taken into consideration as part of the criteria. So that is always there, and I think there's a good relationship with the Community Asset Transfer body. Can't remember their name offhand, but so that's always, the links are always there. Local councils, really important in terms of, particularly in the civic centres where they have either levelling up or city deals, and it's where you can use and maximise that to bring forward shared accommodation between local and central government, particularly if there's a citizen-facing element to it. And we're working with Ards and North Downburn Council. We've had conversations with Craigavon Council, and PSG, the Solace Group, always very keen to make sure we have a consolidation footprint in their region, and they have a consolidation to work closely together, so those links are there. Does that answer your question on the estate?
Yeah, I'd just be keen to get more info then just on the community asset transfer bit, just how successful it's actually been, even with the D1 process, or are there changes that we could potentially make, because there hasn't been too many transfers. And I know within DFC that has policy responsibility, there's obviously a paper there around community wealth building and kind of building and looking at assets. So again, just to see if there's more work or if there's gaps in existing policies where we can enhance that would actually encourage those transfers, or at least build capacity, because I think that's one of the big things, particularly for the third sector, is the capacity once the asset is transferred going forward. That's a critical issue, and I suppose that was mine around the procurement board, and obviously the Procurement Act. Obviously part of that is to create a more level playing field, allowing smaller businesses to gain access, but is the capacity there in the system for them to be ready for when that act comes into play? And if not, is there a plan to build the capacity once that happens? And then also around, are there any implications with the Procurement Act in terms of the Windsor framework and agreements, and also any impacts on cross-border procurement and trade as well?
Lot there.
Sorry,
that's
I know that was
okay.
another.
Because I'm still back on the estate one, because you asked about community asset transfer and the policy and whether there are any gaps. There are gaps, and that has been reviewed, and Tony Simpson should be here with you on his first day brief. So he's strategic policy and reform, and he looks after that community asset transfer. I'll mention to him as well that you're interested in that. In terms of the Procurement Act and levelling the playing field for SMEs, this is really important to us here, because 87% of our business already goes to SMEs, but SMEs is a bit of a because it's 250 employees or less, and most of the companies here operating here have that. You're talking about the micro and the really small, or the community and voluntary sector. Work very closely with the social enterprises. We're also forming stronger links between ourselves and economy on that, because in DOF, to build capacity in supply bases, there's potentially a conflict there. So we're working very closely with because the social economy policy sits with the Department for Economy, but we do believe there's capacity building and happening there. We work very closely with Intertrade Ireland, who go to tender, and that allows capacity building in small and medium enterprises, particularly micro businesses, to get that foot on the ladder. We also encourage really small businesses to look for supply chain opportunities, and that's the benefit of social value, because social value, part of the mechanism in that is to encourage entrepreneurship, bring SAs, social enterprises, into supply chain, and we've seen some really good work in that. There is a review of the policy ongoing at Strategic Investment Board. They did one last April, and the outcome of that was that neither the market nor the Centres of Procurement Expertise were ready for the 20% uplift. We went to talk to the social enterprise, we talked to the voluntary community sector, and they couldn't see the benefit of increasing it. They didn't think that it was a particularly good time, and we didn't have sufficient data. We've called for information from all of the procurement organisations in mid-February, and we're doing Strategic Investment Board is doing that review at the minute. And then, because you'll know the policy is actually written in such a way that it's increased to 20% subject to executive approval. So we will be providing a report to our Minister to bring to the Executive, and the Executive will then decide whether it goes to 20%. Really interesting, Tech UK did a review of social value across globally, including the South, and they actually found that our policy was most worthy of note, using their words, and they said it was actually very well structured and it was easy to demonstrate the impact of social value. I do think there's more we can do, and the review will show that perhaps the threshold for services is too low. We find that it's actually creating a barrier for some small and medium enterprises because they have not got the capacity to do the additional social value as much as larger firms, and that wasn't the intention of the policy. So the review will be very comprehensive and provide some positives, some things that we can improve on, and then it will provide the stats that the Executive can decide on the 20%.
Thank you. It's just, is there a time scale for the review, or can the committee be alerted to it, or in terms of
end of March?
Yeah.
End of March is
Okay.
our time scale to bring it to Minister. Middle of March, hopefully to Minister, and then so certainly we will bring that to you.
Okay. Thank you.
And then I think you talked about the representation on the procurement
Yes.
board. The 2020 reconstitution of the board was brought forward by the Minister, so it will be the new Minister to decide. The NIAO report, which launched in April 2023, was actually critical of the governance, accountability of the board, because it didn't really have decision-making powers. So the review of public procurement, which we'll obviously bring forward to the committee once the Minister has had a chance to decide what she wants to, how she wants to take it forward, will be what that governance should look like. But there should always be a place, representative bodies like construction, FM, IT, anything that we're buying, and the SME voice, and we had trade union side the last time. It was very helpful. That led to the living wage, the Carnegie principles, all the fair working practices. So I can't see any issue with that going forward, but certainly we'll bring anything forward that the Minister has agreed.
Thank you.
I'm here and Chair for a wee second. Owen Tennyson.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and I guess I've a very brief point and a very brief question. The first is just sort of following up on Deirdre's around community asset transfer, and I agree with the points that Deirdre's made. Conscious that specifically in the context of the estate rationalisation, which I absolutely support, it's the right approach, and it's good to hear the progress is being made. But I am aware of one particular example in my own constituency where there's a move to rationalise the estate the asset has been surplus to the department's requirements for some time, and they've actually had community and voluntary sector tenants in the building. So just to sort of alert you to that risk whereby disposal could actually have a negative impact, and community asset transfer should even be explored as part of that process, but also there will be some circumstances where a transfer won't necessarily be appropriate. So just to ensure that as part of the estate rationalisation that there are no sort of adverse consequences for the community and voluntary sector would be something that I'd really welcome. Turning to my question then, which also relates to something that Deirdre asked about, in terms of the transfer of building regulations from the department to the Department for Communities, do we anticipate that that will have any impact on the timelines around the energy efficiency uplifts which were consulted on in December? And I know you can't really give a timeline around the transfer, but can you give a timeline about when the uplifts might actually apply?
Well, the committee will see the outcome of the consultation before the summer recess, and then it will be, and that the outcome of the consultation will help direct the next stage of what the uplift will be. And again, there's what's called NIBRAC, the Northern Ireland Building Regulation Advisory Committee, which is made up of industry experts and the departments that it impacts on, and some of the sector as well. So they will look at the technical aspects of this. The biggest thing in terms of building regs, and sometimes people are really critical of how slow they move, but it has to be linked to the capacity for people. You couldn't come forward with the best energy efficient proposals where the electricity grid couldn't cope with it, or where the industry doesn't have the technology to build. So it's always very much sort of aligned to what the capability is, but a bit beyond, because we have to move the standards upwards in terms of energy efficiency. It will be no slower than we can bring it forward, because we know how urgent this is. We know the 2030 targets are looming, and we know that a lot of people are looking to building regs to make sure that new homes that will be around in 2050 are as energy efficiency as possible, but I can't actually give you when the uplifts will come in.
No, I understand. Can I just follow up briefly on that? And appreciate the points that you've made around capability. And I think in Northern Ireland we usually do run about 18 months to about 2 years behind other parts of the UK. Are there particular areas that are apparent sort of barriers in terms of capability? Is there any sort of one or two areas where you think, you know, whether it be the grid or whatever else, that's consistently coming up as a barrier?
I know the last time we brought it to committee, the grid, the representation you had from one of the industry bodies was that the electricity grid, whether it was the cost, and I think there's a difference between how cost is apportioned here to how cost is apportioned in other parts of the UK, and I think that's been muted as a barrier before. But I actually sit on the retrofit hub for the Belfast City Council, and I know there's a huge amount of work happening here. And a lot of the sectors like education, who have 1,200 schools, or the health, who have a lot bigger estates than ours, we're all looking at this, and it's good that we're all talking and trying to share the developments, because it is a hugely complex area. We've also been talking to the CITB, the Construction Industry Training Board, and also organisations like CEF, because we need to have the skills for that new modern methods of construction. We also have concerns about the skills that we have to actually, you know, do the basic without even going to the modern, you know, the engineers, the quantity surveyors, the civils, all of the work. So we're talking to universities as well to make sure that we have the skills that we need for now, but also the skills that we need for the future. But that would be another gap, skills.
Perfect, thank you, Sharon.
Much in the clerk.
Chair, just to seek clarification in terms of the energy bill that's coming from the Department for the Economy at an unspecified time, at least I don't know what it is yet. Are officials engaging with them around these kinds of issues? You mentioned the connecting to the grid, the complications that we have had here that don't necessarily occur elsewhere. Is that all being brought together?
It is.
Okay, that's...
And there's overlap here with the work of the Department for Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs with all the climate. So you'll find the experts that bring you the building regs are also sitting on groups. They're being spread very thin for DRA, for DFA, because of the same people. We have very limited skills, or people with those skills in the civil service.
Chair, just to gather up the updates, sorry, do you want to...
No, if you're relying on the energy branch in the economy department, we're in a very bad place.
In terms of updates, we already have some briefing planned around the public procurement bill. And obviously, you have now some time-bound issues. You know, we'll have to look at those as well coming forward. Also, the chair wanted to seek ongoing updates around the Fujitsu situation as that develops. There's a number of other aspects of policy that we will be picking up on as we go forward, and those are being wrapped into our forward work programme, which is now largely fit to be bursting. But that's pretty much all in terms of updates, Chair, coming out of the session.
Okay, well, thank you very much, and thanks Sharon and Paul for giving us your time. Look forward to working with you through the committee. Thank you. Okay, so we're agreed then.
Yep, good on that. Let me just start on
Super. Okay, so agenda item number 9 is correspondence. For refer members, starting page 283 of the meeting pack, correspondence, we have 6 items, an index included at page 284. So members, if I draw your attention to 2 of those items, members will then have an opportunity to comment on any other items of correspondence in which they have a particular interest. So item 2 at page 286 of the meeting pack, this is the annual report of the Lay Observer for Northern Ireland 22-23, and the committee would normally note the report as per the suggested action in the correspondence index. However, members will note that the Lay Observer, Marion Cree, indicates in the report that her role as Legal Services Oversight Commissioner has not yet been enacted through secondary legislation. So I would seek members' agreement to ask the Department for an update on when the relevant SR will be made. Is everyone agreed? Yeah, thank you. And then item 5, page 338 of the meeting pack, correspondence from an individual regarding Victoria Square residential tower. The clerk has made me aware that this correspondence has also been received by the Justice and the DERA committees. I would seek members' agreement to forward the correspondence to the Department of Finance for response, highlighting the need for clarification as to which department is responsible for the defective premises Northern Ireland Order 1975, and it would be required to amend it, as well as ascertaining rationale for residents' requests for rates for the properties to be waived has not been granted. Just to ask members, are they content with this action?
Yeah, no, it's on Justice tomorrow, so
and I think, Chair, that's the key thing here is we're looking obviously under Standing Order 64 in terms of dealing with an issue that might cross a number of departments, and that this will help us ascertain just who really truly is the lead. Also, I think the Chair would also be flagging up, he is in a constituency MLA capacity, is meeting with residents, I think, later on this week.
That's grand. So we're in agreement on that point. So I would ask members, are they content to action the remaining items of correspondence as set out in the cover sheet, or whether they have any comments or wish to discuss any of them? No? Okay, thank you. Moving on, agenda item number 10 is our draft forward work programme. So refer members to the draft forward work programme at page 369. And ask the clerk to speak to that, please.
Chair, as in any good forward work programme, this one is now already out of date. As soon as it was in the pack, it was out of date. So we've had confirmation from the Minister for the 13th of March. She'll do strategic priorities and update on where the budget process sits and so on, and anything that comes up in between time. And also, I flagged up to members earlier our session before the committee's meeting next week around the Public Finance Unit from RAISE giving us some background budget process and so on. So we'll get more detail out to members on that one. So those are additional to what you've already got there. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. And just looking to it myself, I think that the fact that we'll have Land and Property Service in next week for detail on rates, which is very current, and then the following week the Fiscal Council in light of their recent report, and then the Minister. I think that's 3 pretty key things in the short term, which I'm pleased to see on there. Do any members want to comment or?
Just on any other business, Chair, which is related to the forward work programme, because I want to burden it further with a meeting. I don't know if you all are aware, but NISRA and ONS, which is the Office of National Statistics in the UK, have changed their methodology around, it is mythology too, mainly, around the way they record access deaths. So in the past, whilst there was a difference between NISRA and ONS, in that NISRA left 1 year out of the pandemic, how they calculated excess deaths was they basically looked at the last 5 years, and then they got the average of that 5 years, and then that was anything above that average was an excess death. Now they're using other methodology that basically adds projections, age-specific projections, and also pandemic projections, which I cannot get my head around. And for that matter, because this is a really serious issue and it leads to a lack of confidence in statistics, I would propose that we had asked NISRA to come along. Dr. Philip Wheels, who's the Chief Executive and Registrar General of NISRA, who's kindly written to me, I would like to propose that we invite them along to give us a presentation on the actual change in methodology.
Thanks for that, Paul. And I just note with NISRA being part of Department of Finance, I don't actually see it anywhere, on our list
Chair, we
here.
literally now have just confirmed for the 13th. So that is yet
Coming
more.
in, yeah.
Will come on the 13th.
So with the
We're-
Minister, the same day.
After the Minister, but not the same session as the Minister, but the same.
You read my mind.
Well, no,
Perfect committee
we'd already been looking to slot them in, and this is a really live process, so that's why I'm looking to Clarita at the same time. But we're looking at the 13th, and that should be okay.
Thank you very
that's-
much.
And that's great. Is there anything else anyone wants to put in the short or longer term bullet point for the committee work plan?
Just to keep it flexible,
Just keep
so
it
as
live,
we get
yeah.
more briefings, I'm sure they'll add to.
No, that's grand. So our
Thank you.
members in agreement then, and the forward work plan.
Yeah, the more
we
flexible
published
we keep
on
it, the more I can add to it.
We will try and
Yeah.
keep it fairly open as we go along.
So we're in agreement then that on this work plan that it can be published in the committee web pages. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So item 11. Any other business? Anyone want to raise? Anything else this time? No? Okay. It's grand. So our next committee meeting is scheduled for next Wednesday, the 28th of February. As Clark had mentioned, training session to be circulated at 1 p.m. in this room.
Yeah, this
in
room.
this
We've
room.
got this room.
And then followed straight on 2 p.m.
I missed that, sorry, maybe started the meeting. Can you, what does that do?
Ray's Public Finance Unit are going to come in and do it'll be a series of modules, but the first two will be next Wednesday at 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock in here. So it's going to be budget process and beyond.
Right.
Everything sort of finance related. That'll run in tandem with the ones we're planning from the department as well. A lot of it's down to getting this room.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But we'll send out more details.
Yeah, thanks.
That's grand.
Thank you,
Are we content that the committee meeting does now adjourn?
Yep.
Yeah.
Agree.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Committee Room 21. Sound.